Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki lived multiple different lives across alternate realities, Naruto times Hinata times Sakura times Ino times more, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A 17-year-old Naruto Uzumaki blinked as he opened his eyes and found himself in a forest. Sitting up he began to look around and saw a fire on a log across from him wearing a black cloak with a hood on it. The figure said in a female voice, "Hello Naruto." Naruto blinked as he heard that voice as it sounded familiar and Naruto said, "Do I know you?" The figure sniffed slightly and said, "Somewhat." "Naruto, what was the last thing you remember before you woke up here?" Naruto frowned a moment before his eyes widened and said, "The battle. I have." The figure held up her hand and said, "Is over. That battle has been over for a little while now. You arrived, fought, saved the day, but at a cost. Right now you are in limbo, the land between life and death." Naruto's eyes widened as the figure slowly reached up and removed the hood and Naruto gasped as his eyes widened again as he saw a figure he only seen a few times and never actually in person. Naruto gasped out, "Mom." Kushina Uzumaki smiled at Naruto and said, "We can't touch right now son, so don't come over here. I need to speak with you and if we touch then some stuff will happen." Naruto frowned as heard this and asked, "What stuff?" Kushina sighed and said, "This isn't going to be easy to explain son, but I need to tell you a story. My story to be exact. I need to tell you about my life. Then you will be given a choice." Naruto bit his lip and said, "What choice mom?" Kushina said, "Let me tell you my story and I'll explain." Naruto nods his head and Kushina said, "Now first thing you should know is that Kushina isn't my only name. It was just the name I was known in the elemental nations by. You see, I'm not exactly mortal. I'm actually a goddess from another world." Naruto's eyes widened as he heard this and said, "A goddess?" Kushina said, "Yes son. In my world there are several gods and goddesses, but you are going to get a kick out of this. There are also 3 beings known as the Fates. Your friend Neji was sort of right when he told you about fate but not completely, but that's not important right now. What is important is that the Fates came to me one day and told me a danger from another world was coming that would destroy my world and kill everyone and everything I cared for in my world would be unable to stop it. They told me that only I could stop it but I would have to leave my world for a little while and be reborn as a mortal in that world and I would have no memories of my real life but once I died a mortal death I would be brought back to my world. I agreed and was reborn into your world as Kushina Uzumaki." Naruto was shocked by what he was hearing and said, "Did you defeat the threat mom?" Kushina smiled and said, "In a way Naruto. You see Naruto, in my world, gods and goddesses sometimes have children with mortals or other creatures and these children are usually called demigods or half-gods. I couldn't defeat the threat myself and I was never meant to. What I actually was supposed to do was give birth to a demigod child who would have the power of both world. Your world and mine. I didn't find that out until I returned and begged the Fates to bring you to my world. They told me that they knew what would happen before they ever came to me originally. They said that I wasn't the one who was to defeat the danger but my son would be which you did." Naruto looked confused and said, "I did." Kushina said, "The battle you just fought. It was a very costly battle son. You won the battle but you died from your injuries as did many others. The Fates agreed to give you a choice. The Fates said since you died they can let you stay dead in your world and go to the afterlife in that world to be judged as you normally would, but we would never see each other again. The other option is that you could be brought to my world and reborn but they would let you remember your past life but you would have to live the life of a demigod child in my world which can be very difficult or dangerous at times. But if you came to my world I would be a lot closer to you and would be able to be in your life some. But only as much as the ancient laws would allow. That is why I told you not to come over and touch me. Right now on that side of the fire is your world. On this side of the fire is my world. You can choose to stay there and go to the afterlife of that world or come to my world and you will have to leave that world forever." Naruto bit his lip and said, "Are my precious people all right mom?" Kushina looked at Naruto and said, "I can't tell you Naruto. The Fates removed the memory of the final outcome of battle. They might be or they might not be. Son, The choice is yours. I know what I want you to do, but I'm being selfish because you're my son. And you have to choose and live with the consequences. What do you want to do? I'm sorry, but you're going to have to choose soon. The fates have given me this chance to talk to you using their powers, but they do have limits of how much patience they have and have other things they have to do. Naruto looked at his mom and asked, "What about Kyuubi? Do I still have Kyuubi in me?" Kushina said, "I don't know. The fates won't tell me. They said it might influence your decision." Naruto, hearing this, frowned a moment and said, "I don't like the fates." Kushina blushed and she said, "They said that nobody does. Even they don't like what they have to do, but they try to do everything they can to save creation. That was why they came to me and why they allowed you to be born. If it wasn't for them, then you never would have been born. For that I thank them because I love you, my son." Naruto froze as he heard those words and a tear fell from his face before a small smile appeared on his face, and he slowly got up and began to walk around the fire toward Kushina, whose eyes widened, and she said, "Son, you." Naruto said, "I love you, Mom, and I want to be with you. That's all I ever wanted, was to be with my family." Kushina smiled brightly before she wrapped her arms around Naruto, who embraced her, and in that moment both mother and son were reunited, and there was a bright flash of light, and then both were gone. After the blinding flash of light, Naruto slowly opened his eyes and looked confused as he saw a room with wooden walls that looked big to him. He started to sit up when he felt a hand on his shoulder that stopped him, and he followed the hand and his eyes widened as his eyes landed on someone he could easily recognize and said, "Dad." Minato Namikaze looked down at Naruto and said, "Hello, son. Don't move yet because you need to learn to control your new body." Naruto blinked and said, "New body? What?" As he looked down at his body and his eyes widened as he saw his body was small. Minato chuckled seeing the shocked look on Naruto's face and said, "Your body is that of you when you were 4 years old, son. Your mom told you that you would be reborn into her world, and so here you are in a new living body." Naruto said, "And you're here also, Dad." Minato looked at Naruto sadly and said, "For now, son. There's a place that demigod children usually go when they are 11 years old. The fates freed me from the Shinigami stomach and brought me to this world, but I only can live until you are 11 years old. Once that happens, I'll die and go back to the Shinigami stomach, but at least I'll have 7 years to be with my son like I always wanted." Naruto said. "But," Minato said, "don't be upset, son. Look at it like I am. We actually get time to be together when the fates didn't have to do that. They wanted to give me and you time to be together as payment because they said they wanted your help to save this world and to protect your mother." Naruto's eyes widened and he forced his body to sit up and said, "Mom's in trouble." Minato said, "Not yet, but she will be. I don't know from what, but the fates said that something was coming that this world couldn't protect itself from. That they wanted to try and change the fate of this world by bringing you here. They thought you would want to protect your mom and this world." Naruto frowned and said, "Let me get this straight. I'm 4 years old again, but I got you and mom in my life, but some danger is coming that is going to try and destroy this world and I have to stop it." Minato sighed and said, "You have to try and stop it. I don't know if you will be able to, but the fates seem to think you could change the future of this world. Also, the fates said that your mother has to follow the ancient laws, which means that while your mother can look at you and is most likely watching over you as we speak, she can't actually speak to you until you actually meet her while she is fulfilling her duties as a goddess. Once you actually meet her, then she will be able to meet you in your dreams or possibly in person, but it will only be a few minutes at a time. It's the same rules the other gods and goddesses have to follow. It's too dangerous for gods to take care of their children themselves." Naruto looked shocked and said, "Why?" Minato said, "There are monsters in this world, son. Monsters that want to kill the gods, and because you're a child of a goddess, they will want to kill you as well. You have a smell that will attract monsters. The more powerful you are, the more contact you have with your godly parent, the stronger the smell will become, making it where more and more monsters will be attracted to you and try to kill you. The gods have to stay away from their children in order to protect them by keeping their scent low so they might not get noticed by monsters." Naruto frowned and said, "That's not fair." Minato looked at Naruto and said, "Life's not fair, son. We both have been given another chance at life and to have a family, son. Let's be thankful for what we have and just ignore the fact of what we don't." Naruto closed his eyes and sighed and said, "I guess. Minato smiled sadly and said, I'm proud of you, son. Naruto blinked and looked at his dad, and Minato said, I saw your entire life you lived as did your mother. I know everything you went through, and I am proud of the man you grew up to be. Naruto blushed under the look of pride his father gave him, and Minato said, Now I'm going to get you something to eat while you sit here on your bed and try to get used to your new body. Try slowly working with your fingers and toes, and then move your arms, legs, and so on until you feel you can properly move. Once I come back and we eat, I'll help you learn to walk in your new body. As Minato got to the door, Naruto said, Dad, what about Kyuubi? Minato looked at Naruto and said, Well, time skip. An 11-year-old Naruto Uzumaki looked at the grave in front of him and said, Well, I guess this is it, Dad. I know that you are back in the belly of the Shinigami now, but I hope that you will still be able to watch me and remember all the good times we had together. I thank the fates for allowing us these past 7 years. I'll treasure them always, but it's time for me to go. It's time I try to find this camp for demigods, and Dad. I'll protect Mom and kick some monster for you. With a smile on his face. Naruto looked up at the sky and said, Believe it. He then turned and began to walk away without looking back. If he had, he would have seen the figure of a woman standing by the grave watching him leave, and the woman said, He is his father's son, and I couldn't be happier or prouder. Yes, I know, but he will succeed. He is your son after all. 3 days later, Naruto was sitting around a fire in the woods near a stream with a couple of fish cooking above the fire when he tensed as he heard a twig snap a moment before a female shout of surprise was heard. Naruto quickly got to his feet and looked around and saw a girl who looked to be 13 years old with red hair and silver eyes, wearing a silver parka hanging upside down with ninja wire wrapped around her and an angry look on her face. Naruto frowned as he said, Who are you and what are you doing here? As his eyes began to glance around the woods. The girl glared at him and said, Release me now. Naruto tilted his head sideways as he looked around but kept an eye on the girl who was upside down and said, First tell me who you and what are you doing here? The girl's eyes widened slightly and said, Let me go or else. Naruto said, The world is a dangerous place. I know that looks can be deceiving. You look like you're just a normal little girl, but you're not. I can see the knives you have in holsters on your clothing as well as the one you are using to cut yourself free. I can also see that those knives are made of celestial bronze, which means you are either a daughter of some god or goddess, a clear-sighted mortal, a lover of a god or goddess, or a legacy of a god or goddess. The fact you got this close to my camp without setting off a trap means that you were purposely trying to sneak toward my camp, so tell me who you are and why you are here. You can also stop trying to cut. Those wire holding you is made of a combination that can hold mortals, monsters, demigods, gods, or titans. Unless I release you myself, you will be stuck there until you die or killed by some monster after I leave you. Now answer my question, who are you and why are you here? The girl froze as she heard what Naruto claimed and said, You're lying. Naruto said, No, I'm not. The fates themselves sent me scrolls with instructions on how to make that wire. The girl froze again and looked at Naruto with a little fear on her face and said, Why would the fates do something like that? Naruto looked at her and said, Answer me and maybe I might tell you. The girl glared at Naruto as she kept trying to cut herself free, and Naruto frowned as he saw this and said, Are you hungry? The girl blinked and said, What? As she stopped trying to cut herself free as she heard his question. Naruto said, Are you hungry? Is that why you were trying to sneak here? Hoping to get some food? The girl frowned and said, Why should I tell you anything? Naruto sighed and said, Look, if you're not going to give me a name to call you, then I'll make one up to call you. The girl closed her mouth and said nothing, and Naruto said, Fine, then I'll call you Uni. The girl blinked and asked, Uni? In a questioning tone. Naruto looked at her and said, Yeah. Your eyes are silver, a color of purity. When I look at them, it makes me think of either the moon or unicorns. I could try to name you something after the moon or after the goddess of the moon, but I don't want to anger a goddess, especially since my mother is one. That leaves me with unicorns, so I'll call you Uni for short, unless you want to give me your name. Uni glared at him but kept her mouth shut, and Naruto said, All right, Uni it is. So Uni, are you hungry? Is that why you were sneaking up on my camp? Uni pursed her lips and nods her head slightly, and Naruto looked at her and said, "Your heartbeat increased, so I know you're lying, but whatever. I don't know your story or why you are here. It's obvious you don't trust me, and I don't feel like seeing you hanging upside down all night, especially when we can be attacked by monsters and it might be nice to have some company to eat with. Just give me a minute and I'll let you down." As he moved out of Uni view, who tried to turn her head to see what he was doing. A few moments later, she felt herself moving and looked around before looking toward her feet and saw Naruto standing on a tree branch and lowering her to the ground. Once she was gently let down to the ground, she saw Naruto jump down out of the tree and walk toward her while holding the end of the wire, and he said, "I'm going to have to stand you up in order to free you, so I'll grab the wire near your left arm and use it to pull you up. Once you're stood up, don't move because this wire is made to tighten the more you fight against it." Naruto then leaned down and grabbed the wire like he said he was going to do, and then pulled Uni up to her feet. Uni said nothing as she eyed Naruto cautiously, and he stepped back from her while still holding the end of the wire, and Naruto said, "Now that you're standing up, I'm going to begin to unwrap you. This wire is going to start glowing blue and move to unwrap itself. Just stay calm and don't move, and it will only take about 10 seconds to free you. When you are free, just step back away from me." Naruto saw that Uni was watching him and the wire in his hand that began to glow blue as Naruto sent chakra into it, and the wire then began to vibrate, startling Uni, who tensed but remembered Naruto words, and then the wire slipped off her body and formed a circle around her feet. Glaring at Naruto, Uni stepped backwards from Naruto away from the wire and him. Naruto said, "See, that wasn't so bad," causing Uni to glare at him even more. Uni said, "Who are you?" Naruto said, "Do you mind if we sit down and talk while eating? The fish are starting to burn." As he moved toward the fire, Uni put her hands on her hips and said, "I demand you tell me who you are." Naruto looked at her and said, "Look, Uni, I don't know your story, but I can tell just by your attitude that you have either been hurt and try to act all big and bad in order to push others away, or you're used to bossing others around because you think you are better than others. It's not my fault that you were sneaking into my campsite, so the fact you got caught in a trap is your fault. You're the one acting like and disrespecting me when I have been nothing but kind to you by offering you my food and a place to rest by the fire to warm yourself, even when you lied to me about why you were here. Now you ask my name. It's Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but I mostly just go by Naruto Uzumaki. Now, would you like the other fish, or would you rather go hungry? I'll eat it if you don't want it, since I will not waste something." Uni pursed her lips at Naruto and said, "How do I know that you haven't done something to the fish?" Naruto reached across the fire and tore a piece of meat off the fish and stuck it in his mouth and asked, "Happy?" Uni frowned as she looked at the fish and then at Naruto a moment before she slowly reached down and grabbed the fish off the fire and quickly backed up while keeping her eyes on Naruto. Naruto watched her as she began to eat the fish quickly, and he said, "So, want to talk?" Uni looked at Naruto as she chewed on a piece of fish and said, "No." Naruto sighed and said, "Fair enough. I got a sleeping bag over there if you want to sleep in it. I'll take first watch and wake you in about 5 hours. Uni blinked and looked at him confused and asked, "What?" Naruto said, "Monsters, Uni. It's obvious that you know about the monsters by your weapons, since celestial bronze won't work on mortals but it will on demigods and monsters. One of us should stay awake to make sure that a monster doesn't sneak through my camp defenses and attack us while we sleep. Since there are 2 of us, then we can share the guard rotation by taking half. You can sleep for 5 hours while I keep the fire going and get fresh water for the morning, while you can guard the second half and put the water on to boil so we can use it to cook and wash up with in the morning before we leave to go on our journey wherever it may be." Uni looked at him and said, "And why should I help guard?" Naruto said, "And why should I offer you my sleeping bag to sleep on so you can get a more comfortable sleep than on the dirty ground? It's the right thing to do. To share a burden so that it's not so difficult." Uni sneered and said, "And what would you do if I wasn't here?" Naruto said, "You have your secrets and I have mine. So do you agree to take second watch?" Uni frowned as she took the last bite of the fish and said, "Yes. Quietly." Naruto nods and said, "Then try to get you some sleep." As he stood up and ran toward a tree and used its trunk as a springboard to jump up onto one of the lower hanging branches, and he sat down on the branch, shocking Uni. Yuni looked at him for several moments before she walked over toward the sleeping bag and crawled into it. She laid there and watched Naruto, who was slowly turning his head looking around him, and she said, "You asked me my name. I don't know it." Naruto looked back at her with a confused look on his face, and Yuni said, "The first memory I have is being attacked by monsters. I had my daggers on me fighting the monsters. After I destroyed the last monster, I looked around me confused, wondering who I was and where I was and what was happening around me. All I found besides the gold dust from monsters that was out of place was an old clay jar that had a little water in it." Naruto looked in thought a moment and said, I'm not a doctor, but I do have some knowledge and experience in healing. You might have amnesia from a head injury, or?" Yuni asked. "Or what?" Naruto said. "The water might have been from the Lethe River from the underworld. It's also known as the River of Forgetfulness. It makes you forget your past. It would explain why you can't remember, but I could be wrong. There might have been a monster that might have the ability to take away people's memories." Yuni asked. "How do you know so much about monsters and stuff?" Naruto said. "For the last 7 years I've been studying everything I could about ancient Greece and Rome and their myths in order to better prepare myself. Mortals don't know that there is a mist that causes them not to see what is really happening, so they don't realize the truth about those myths. Do you have anywhere to go?" Yuni said. "No. I've been just traveling through the woods catching food where I could, or stealing supplies from campers who I come across. That's why I was sneaking toward your camp. To see if I could steal something while you were asleep that would have helped me survive." Naruto frowned and said, "I understand. It's dangerous for you to be doing that though. Not everyone would be as kind as I am. Some might capture you and take advantage of you." Yuni got angry and said, "I'm not weak." Naruto said, "No, you're not. But anyone can be captured or hurt if they are not careful. Look at what happened earlier. That could have just been as easily a bear trap or a pit trap, and you could have been seriously injured or killed, and the person who set the trap could have come and found you while injured and either helped you or taken advantage of you. As a female, you have more danger to face than a male does usually. Not because women are weaker, but because people usually care more about themselves than they do others, and it's easier to take pleasure from a woman than another man. Especially out in the wilderness where they think no one will be able to find out what happened here." Yuni tensed as she heard this, and she sat up and said, "How do I know you're not going to take advantage of me?" Naruto snorted and said, "If you knew me better, then you would never even think about asking that question." Yuni blinked and looked at Naruto confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Naruto looked at her and said, "Look, I can't force you to trust me. Sometimes in life you have to be willing to take a risk. Sometimes those risks turn out to be a disaster, but other times those risks turn out to be something truly great. It's your choice. Now I'm waking you at 1 a.m., so you better get some sleep because I plan to go to bed shortly after that." Yuni frowned but laid her head back down, and Naruto heard her breathing even out as she fell asleep. Several hours later, Yuni felt something poking her in the hand, and she reached out quickly and grabbed it while keeping her eyes closed before she felt the object trying to pull away from her hand several times, causing her to groan and open her eyes, and she blinked her eyes a few times to get them to focus before she saw her hand was holding a long stick that was being held by Naruto, who was over 3 feet away, and she glared at him and said, "What do you want?" Naruto said, "It's 1 a.m. Time for you to get up and me to go to sleep like we talked about earlier. I used a stick to wake you so you wouldn't think I was trying to take advantage of you." Yuni growled and said, "I'm not going to," as she pulled the sleeping bag protectively around her and closed her eyes to try to go back to sleep. Naruto frowned and said, "Fair enough," as he held out his hand, and the next moment Yuni was covered in smoke, startling her, and when the smoke cleared she saw Naruto was on the other side of the campfire with the sleeping bag in his hands, and he laid it down and wrapped it around him, and he said, "Tomorrow night you can take first watch and I'll take second. Good night," as he laid his head down and closed his eyes. Yuni looked back and forward from Naruto to the ground where she was still laying and thought, "How did he get that sleeping bag from me when I was still inside it? And what was with that smoke?" Reluctantly she stood up and looked around before she went to sit down on a log by the fire and put some wood on it to make it bigger and warmer. The next morning Naruto woke up and found Yuni sleeping against a log by the fire that had pretty much went out, and he sighed and said, "Yeah, she's taking first watch tonight," as he got up and got a bucket of water and came back and dumped it on top of Uni, causing her to shriek. Uni was on her feet sputtering and looking around totally pissed off, and then she looked at Naruto, who had an amused look on his face, and she said, "What the hell was that for?" Naruto said, "You put us in danger by not only staying awake for your watch but letting the fire go out so we have no hot water to wash up, cook, or drink. I know you're used to doing things your own way when it was just you, but we are together now and we have to work together to look after each other." Uni said, "We are not together." Naruto looked at her and said, "Then where are you going to go? You said it yourself, you don't know who you are or where you're from or even your original name, Uni. I thought about your story last night while I was on watch, and while yes, it is possible it could just be a head injury, it also might be the lethe water, and it's possible a monster poured the lethe water on you. It is also possible you poured the lethe water on yourself." Uni eyes widened as she heard this and said, "What? Why would I do that?" Naruto sighed and said, "Maybe because you wanted to forget your old life, Uni. Maybe something terrible happened to you and you just wanted to forget in order to make the pain go away. I don't know, but what I do know is that right now you really don't have anything. No home, no family, no purpose, and nothing to protect you should you become injured, captured, or trapped. You can leave anytime you want, but where will you go? What will you do? How will you survive? Keep on stealing from campers, trying to avoid monsters. What about when the weather turns colder and winter gets here? Traveling around in the world is dangerous. When you're around other humans, it gets more dangerous because you never know if you can trust them until they have earned your actual trust and proved you can trust them and not using you for their own purpose." Uni frowned as she heard his words and said, "Then what am I supposed to do? How do I know I can trust you?" Naruto smiled gently at her and said, "I don't know if it was you or the monsters that made your memories go away, but I know a place we might be able to find out. It's the same place I am going. It's a camp for demigods like us. You may have already been there and someone there knows you. There might also be a cure for the lethe water. I don't know, but what I do know is if you are willing to travel with me till we get to this camp, then it will be safer for both of us, but we are going to have to work as a team to get there because the closer we get to it, the more monsters we will encounter and they will probably get stronger as well. I admit I am using you because it is nice to have someone watch your back if we get attacked by monsters. But in this case it would be you using me as well. I would watch your back, you watch mine. I try to help you with things you need to know that you have forgotten, and maybe we might be able to trust each other enough to become friends. So the choice is yours. You can go on your own way and hopefully you might find some way to survive and maybe regain your memories, or you can come with me and we can try to make it to that camp and maybe regain your memories. But even if you don't regain your memories, we could start asking about the gods and see if we can't find out about your weapons to see if maybe they can be used to help find out who you really are." Uni bit her lip and said, "But what if nobody there knows me or that I did use the water myself?" Naruto said, "That's a risk you're going to have to take. You may not ever regain your memories, but if you go with me, I promise you that you will get the chance to start making new ones. And I'll do my best to make them good ones so that if you did it yourself, then the good memories we make together will help take away the pain you wanted to get away from." Uni looked at him for several minutes and she took a deep breath and said slowly, "All right. I'll go with you. So where is this camp?" Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, "North somewhere. I don't know exactly where. My dad told me he was told by my mother that finding the camp is part of the quest all demigods have to take to get there. I captured a monster who could speak and I forced him to tell me what he knew about the camps, and he told me there were 2 camps. One for Greek demigods and one for Roman demigods. Camp Half-Blood and Camp Jupiter. He told me one was west and one was north. I'm trying to find Camp Half-Blood first to see if it's where I'm supposed to go." Uni groaned and said, "You don't know where you're going. What happens if you go to the wrong camp?" Naruto said, "Hey, sometimes it's not the destination that's important but the journey. After all, I did meet my new friend Uni on this journey. I can't wait to see what other great things will be discovered on it." Uni let a small smile appear on her face and said, "You're terrible." Naruto said, "Perhaps. Now do you have any cloths besides the ones I just soaked?" Uni frowned as she looked down at her cloths and Naruto said, "Thought not. Let me get some of my cloths and you can try them on until you have a chance to wash and dry your own. As Naruto walked to a tree and moved a bush and pulled out a small pack and opened it and pulled out a pair of blue jean shorts and a white shirt and gave them to Uni, who looked around nervously, and Naruto said, "I'll stay here at camp and restart the fire. Go into the woods and find a place to change." Uni looked at him a moment before nodding and walking away to change. Naruto turned and started to gather some of the firewood that he had set up for the fire the previous night that Uni didn't use, and was setting it back in the fire pit when a female scream was heard coming from the direction Uni went. Acting on instincts, Naruto quickly ran toward the direction Uni went, and when he arrived he saw Uni without her shirt on, holding one of her daggers, looking scared at a huge golden fur lion that looked ready to pounce. The lion pounced toward Uni, and Naruto quickly used replacement and switched places with Uni, causing her to appear by the tree he had been beside, and Naruto appeared right in front of the lion, and Naruto acted quickly and was covered in smoke. The lion barreled through the smoke and landed on the ground and looked around confused, while Uni was looking very confused between the lion that had just attacked her and the golden hair fox that had just appeared where Naruto had been standing. The fox was covered in smoke a moment before. There stood Naruto looking at the lion, and Naruto said, "Are you alright, Uni?" Uni swallowed hard a moment and said, "Yeah, I was changing and I heard a noise behind me and saw that creature jumping toward me. I jumped to the side and you showed up a few moments later." Naruto said, "I heard a female scream and thought it was you. I don't think this is a regular lion. It's too big." Uni said, "I threw a couple of daggers at it and they just bounced off." Naruto frowned and said, "The Nemean lion. It's a monster. Legend says that either Hercules or Heracles killed it by strangling it. Myth keeps mixing those two up, so I don't know which." Uni flinched slightly when she heard the name Heracles, and she said, "Why isn't the lion still attacking? Why is it just standing there?" Naruto looked at the lion and said, "He's standing there because he is first listening to us, since he likes to play with his food before he eats it. Next is because he is not sure which one of us he wants to eat, and then there is the last reason." Uni, keeping an eye on the lion, asked, "And what's that?" Naruto smirked and said, "A predator will often flee, leaving a prey if a more dangerous predator arrives and can make it the prey instead." Uni turned to Naruto looking confused and quit looking at the lion, which saw this and roared before he leapt toward her. Naruto threw out his opened hand, and a blue wave of energy came flying out of his hand and took the shape of a huge hand that grabbed the lion and slammed its body against a tree, causing the tree to break and begin to fall. Naruto jumped out of the way of the falling tree, and the blue hand disappeared back into Naruto's body. The lion roared angrily at Naruto and charged toward him. Naruto used replacement on himself with a limb from the fallen tree, and the lion, who had the limb in its mouth, spat the limb out and roared again at Naruto before leaping toward him again. Naruto raised his hand again, and a blue hand shot out of his hand again and grabbed the lion's head and twisted quickly. A snap was heard as the body of the lion fell to the ground with a hard thud, and the body of the lion began to dissolve, leaving golden fur and 4 daggers behind. Naruto said, "Spoils of victory. You want it?" As he picked up the fur. Uni was looking at Naruto in shock as she looked between the fallen tree, the fur and daggers, and Naruto, and she slowly walked toward Naruto. When she was just 2 feet from him, Uni shocked Naruto by tackling him, and the next thing he knew as he found himself on his back was that Uni had her lips pressed against his, giving him a passionate kiss. Naruto just closed his eyes and enjoyed the kiss until he felt Uni pull away and lay her head in the crook of his neck, and he felt tears flowing onto his shoulder. Naruto slowly wrapped his arms around Uni as she cried, and Uni said while still upset, "I was so scared. I couldn't hurt it and I thought I was going to die. Then you showed up and saved me and beat it." I. Naruto whispered. "Shish, it's all right, Uni. I promise you that I'll do everything I can do to protect you. No monster's going to take you from me." Uni sniffed as she looked up into his eyes and said, "Promise." Naruto smiled gently and kissed the top of her forehead and said, "I promise, Uni, and I never go back on my word. That's my Nindo." Uni smiled and kissed him again, but more gently than she did a few moments before, and then laid her head on his shoulder, and both just laid there in silence for several minutes before Naruto heard Uni softly snoring. Naruto smiled and a puff of smoke appeared, and another Naruto appeared and took off back toward where Naruto camp was, and came back a few minutes later with a backpack, and the Naruto on the ground holding Uni was covered in smoke and reappeared with Uni in his arms, and the clone put the pack over Naruto's shoulder and went up in smoke, and Naruto began gently to carry Uni through the woods. Several hours later, Uni slowly woke up and blinked as she found herself laying on a bed in a room and looked confused a moment before the door to the room opened and Uni saw Naruto walk in carrying a couple of bags in his hand. Naruto smiled seeing Uni awake and said, "I'm glad you're awake. It's been a couple of hours since you fell asleep, so I carried us to a nearby town and got us a hotel room to stay in while we get you some supplies. I also got us some lunch." As he held up the bag, Uni looked confused and said, "Huh." Naruto laughed gently and said, "Maybe this will help." As a puff of smoke appeared in the room and then there was suddenly two Naruto in the room. Naruto said, "I have the ability to make copies of myself, but they can only take one good hit before they go up in smoke. These copies are called Kagbi Bunshin. That is how I usually kept watch while I was asleep. Leave a cage Bunshin to watch to protect me. I carried you near here since you were passed out and I sent a cage Bunshin to rent a hotel room for us. I don't have a lot of money, so I had to only get a room with a single bed. I'll sleep on the floor and you can have the bed. Anyways, once my cage Bunshin rented the room, it threw one of these." As he held up a kunai. Naruto said, "These are special. They make it where I can teleport to their location." As he gently tossed the kunai across the room and disappeared in a yellow flash. Picking up the kunai, Naruto said, "It was created by an ancestor of mine, but my dad mastered that jutsu. It's called the Hiraishin or Flying Thunder God. I used it to bring us here so nobody would see us since you were Well, you're still dressed like you were when the lion attacked." Uni blinked a moment before she looked down and then went bright red as she saw she was still topless, and she quickly looked back at Naruto, who was busy setting things out of the bag on the table with his back to her. Uni took a deep breath and said, Did you?" Naruto said, "I didn't touch you anywhere but your back when you were crying, and I carried you bridal style on the way with an arm around your back and one under your legs. I would never take advantage of a woman, especially one who has no memory of her life. As far as I know, you could have a boyfriend who at this very moment is looking for you. I am also sorry I kissed you back when you kissed me. I shouldn't have, but you surprised me when you kissed me, and for a moment I forgot about you not having your memories and thought that you actually liked me for a moment. I should have realized you were just confused and scared after the attack. I'm sure you didn't mean to kiss me. It just was the moment." Naruto kept his eyes on the table and Uni watched him and she said, "And what if it wasn't just the moment?" Naruto's eyes widened and he turned quickly to look at her in shock before he tilted his head toward the window that had the curtain closed. Uni saw this and smiled slightly and let the covers she was holding fall, and she said, "Naruto, look at me when I talk to you." Naruto said, "Would you like to put a shirt on first?" Uni said, "No, I feel just fine like I am. Now look at me." As a smirk appeared on her face. Naruto frowned as he turned his head to look at her but kept his eyes on her face. Uni saw this and her smirk turned into a small smile and said, "Thank you for saving me, and I do like you a little. You have been nothing but nice to me ever since we met, even when I was acting like a jerk. You were right. You've been right about a lot of things since we first met. I honestly don't know who I was and I may never know who I was, but I do know one thing. I trust you, Naruto. I trust you with my life, and with my body. That is why I am sitting like this, and despite the fact you are looking at my eyes, I can see you still see my, even if they are small, since I am still young, even though I'm not sure I actually am this young." As she looked down, Naruto blinked and asked, "What do you mean?" Uni frowned and said, "When you mentioned Heracles, an image of a girl popped into my head. When it did, I suddenly felt older, a lot older. I can't explain it." Naruto frowned a moment and looked at Uni with a thoughtful look on his face and said, "Uni." Uni looked up at him and Naruto said, "I'm not sure, but I think I might know a way to return your memories." Uni eyes widened as she heard this and asked, "How?" Naruto bit his lip and said, "I can't say much about my past until I meet my mother and she tells me if it's alright to talk about it, but I wasn't born in these lands. I was born in a far-off land where they have different cultures and skills. One of these skills is an ability called genjutsu. It's an illusion skill, making it where the victim it is used against see things that you want them to and not what is really there. There's a chance that the Lethe River water actually causes a genjutsu to be placed on you, making you forget your past life. But genjutsu aren't perfect, and the fact you had that flashback of that girl makes me think it might be a genjutsu, and if so, I might be able to break it. Yuni got a hopeful look on her face and asked, how? Naruto said, well, there are a couple of ways. If you knew how to use the energy of your body called chakra, you could try to break it using that, but since you don't know how to and it would take a long time for me to teach you, I don't think that would work. The next option is you could try to break the genjutsu with mild pain like biting your lips or pulling your hair or breaking a bone. This doesn't always work though, and I bet you've already been hurt enough to break it that way, so that leaves one of the final two ways I know. Yuni asked, what are they? As she bit her lip hard, hoping to regain her memory. Naruto said, well, one would take a long time to explain and would do the same thing as the option I'm about to tell you about, and if this option didn't work, then that option wouldn't work either, so the last option I'll tell you about is where someone tries to break the genjutsu by putting some of their energy into your body. I could try to do that by holding your hand. Would you like me to try? Yuni said. What happens if it doesn't work? Naruto said. Then it doesn't work. I would never do anything to hurt you, Yuni. Yuni bit her lip hard again for a moment and her memories didn't come back, so she held up her hand and said, do it. Naruto walked over and gently grabbed her hand, and his hand was covered in blue chakra, shocking Yuni, who was about to open her mouth, but then she felt a strong energy enter her body through her hand, and then she winces as she closed her eyes as memories began to return to her. Yuni's eyes popped open and her eyes glowed a moment with silver light before they returned to normal, and she looked at Naruto, who looked worried, and said, did it work, Yuni? Yuni looked at Naruto for several moments and she bit her lip and said, no. No, it didn't work. I'm sorry. Naruto frowned slightly but gently squeezed her hand and said, don't worry, Yuni. I'll do everything I can to help you, Yuni. Yuni bit her lip and asked, why? Why are you so nice to me? Naruto turned his head toward the wall and said, Yuni, I. Sighing, Naruto stood up and began to walk toward the wall and then turned back toward the bed and said, damn it. Why do I trust you so much? Making Yuni confused. Naruto looked at her and said, remember when we first met and you were hanging upside down and I told you I could tell you were lying? I know you got at least some of your memories back because your heart rate increased, showing me you're lying. I don't know why you lied, but I still trust you for some reason I can't explain. For some reason I feel I have to tell you the truth. Hell, even Kurama wants me to tell you the truth, and he hates almost everyone. As he grabbed his hair in frustration. Yuni was startled as she heard this, and Naruto said, look. I don't know why, but I feel I need you to know the truth about me. Can you just sit there and listen without interrupting as I tell you my story? Yuni looked at Naruto and saw a look of fear on his face, and she slowly nods his head, and Naruto nods and sits down on the ground, crossing his legs into a lotus position. Once he was seated, he took a deep breath and said, I. I shouldn't be telling you this until I speak with my mother, but my mother is a goddess, and she, well, the fates came to her and asked her to do something, which she did. They told her about a threat to everything she cared about, and that if the threat came here, then there would be no way to stop it. They said that they could, however, send her to where the threat was, but she would live a mortal life. Yuni's eyes widened as she heard this, and Naruto said, it wasn't just a mortal life. She had all her memories taken from her, so she had no idea about being a goddess or anything about her life here. She was born as a mortal and grew up and lived the life of a mortal and died as a mortal the day I was born. Yuni said. But Naruto looked up at her and she stopped talking, and Naruto said, I don't understand it all myself, but it was all done by the fates. But the lands where I was born. It can't be found here. There are even other gods who rule there, but they are known as kamis. Yuni started to open her mouth when a female voice was heard in her head that said, he speaks the truth, causing Yuni's eyes to widen. Naruto closed his eyes and said, there was a man. Some think he was actually a kami in mortal form, but he created 9 immortal creatures to become guardian protectors of the lands. Over time, as these creatures grew in age and size, people began to see them less as guardian and more as creatures of power, and soon people began to see them as monsters and then gave them the name demons and later Biju, because the people of the land would attack them or invade their territory and they would fight to protect their home and lands. Eventually the men of these lands learned to capture the Biju and found ways to either control them or turn them into weapons of war. Naruto took a deep breath and said, my home was called Konoha in the land of fire. It was founded by mostly two clans. The Uchiha clan and the Senju clan. The Uzumaki clan was a cousin to both of these clans, and all three along with the Hyuga clan were all descendants of the Six Realms sage, the man who created the Biju in the first place. The Uchiha and Hyuga were descendants of his eldest son, while the Senju and Uzumaki were descendants of the youngest son. The most powerful of the Biju was the Kyuubi no Kitsune, a nine-tailed fox who was over 100 feet tall, who could crush mountains or create hurricanes with just the swish of his tails. Yuni asked, "What does these Biju have to do with you?" Naruto looked at her and bit his lip and said, "I'm getting there." When Konoha was founded in order to decide who would be the leader of the village, the leader of both the Senju and Uchiha clan fought a duel. The Uchiha used the Kyuubi to try and gain the victory, but the Senju captured the Kyuubi and defeated the Uchiha. But the Senju did not trust the Uchiha not to use the Kyuubi to attack and destroy Konoha in revenge, because he could not handle the fact he was defeated and wasn't the leader. So the wife of the Senju clan leader, whose name was Mito Uzumaki Senju, she used the Uzumaki clan power to seal the Kyuubi inside her own body, trapping it there. Yuni gasped as she heard this, and Naruto said, "The Uzumaki normally lived longer lives than normal mortal, and we are more resistant than others to different types of energies. Normally, if a Biju is put into the body of someone older than 10 years old, then they will die because their body can't handle that much power being put through it. So after the other villages, so Konoha had sealed a Biju. They feared Konoha would use it against them and went out and trapped the other Biju, but didn't have the same advantage as an Uzumaki, so instead they had to seal the Biju into a human body at a young age. The younger, the better, even as an infant." Yuni covered her mouth and Naruto said, "Jinchuriki, the power of a human sacrifice. That is what a person with a Biju is called. Sometimes a Jinchuriki is looked at as a weapon, while others a demon. Almost never is a Jinchuriki looked at as a person. When my mother was born as a mortal, she was born as a member of the Uzumaki clan, and her name was Kushina Uzumaki. The Uzumaki clan mostly lived in a land called Whirlpool and were allies to Konoha. When Mito was nearing the end of her life, my mother was chosen at a young age to become the next Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. She grew up in Konoha and eventually married my father and had me, but on the day I was born, an Uchiha attacked and took me hostage right after my cord had been cut." Yuni gasped as she looked closely at Naruto's body, trying to see if she could see any scars from injuries. Naruto took a deep breath and said, "The man who attacked set explosives on my baby blanket and threw me away, and my father rescued me and removed the blanket before it could kill me, but my mother was kidnapped and taken away, and the Kyuubi was forced from her body, and the Uchiha used his power to control the Kyuubi and used it to attack Konoha." Naruto clenched his fist and said, "Lots of lives were lost that night, including both my mother and father, who with the last of their strength captured the Kyuubi and then sealed it into me," as he looked at Yuni in the eyes as he said the last part. Yuni tensed and looked at Naruto, but seeing the look on Naruto's face as well as how tensed he looked, she said, "I." Naruto said, "Don't. I know this is shocking and confusing for you, and you're probably scared. I know this is a lot to take in, but let me finish my story. Then you can decide if you want to stay with me or leave." Yuni bit her lip and nods her head, and Naruto said, "As I said, my mother died but was brought by the fates back here and returned to being a goddess. My mother wanted to bring me here, but the fates needed me to live in my birth land for a purpose. There was a war for the fate of the world, where the man who attacked the day I was born declared war on the world and captured all the Bijus, but too, he planned to use them to make himself ruler of the world. It was he who was the threat my mother was warned about. I lived my life there until I died defeating that man." Yuni gasped in shock as she looked at Naruto. Naruto said, "I didn't even learn my father's name until I was 16 years old, and I didn't learn the name my mother went by in those lands until I was 17. I died shortly after that, but the fates repaid my mother doing that favor for them by giving me another life, another childhood. They brought me to these lands along with my dead father and returned me to the age of 4. I then lived with my father until the day after my 11th birthday, when he was returned to the dead, since in order to put the Kyuubi in me he had to sell his soul to the Shinigami, or god of death. During my first life, it wasn't that good of a life. It could actually be considered cruel or torture in many ways because of their fear, as well as the fact that the Kyuubi killed so many of their friends and family before he was sealed into me. I was often alone and hurt. Going to bed hungry or injured and wishing that someone would help me, and as I got older and stronger, I went out of my way to help others who were in need of help because I always wished that someone was there for me, so I decided to be the one there for them. That's why I am willing to help you, because I know what it's like to be alone and scared and hurting and wishing that someone was there for you. I know those feelings so well because they were literally beat into me at a young age. Naruto turned to look at Uni, who looked to be ready to cry, and he said, "So that's my story. That's why I am willing to help you. But if you are scared of me and don't want to be near me, I'll give you some money so you can get you some supplies, since I was going to do that anyways, and well, I guess we can go our separate ways. Now that you got at least some of your memories back, you can either try to get the rest back or do whatever. I won't try to force you to stay or leave. I'll just continue my journey, and well, maybe this camp one was told about will be a place I can live. If not, I'll go somewhere else and live. One good thing about having my first life is I learned to survive." With a sad smile on his face, Uni looked at Naruto and said, What happened to Kyuubi when you died?" Naruto said, "Well, he's still with me. Kyuubi real name is Kurama. He said hello, by the way. He says he knows who you are, and that despite the fact what other think, he still has to follow the laws of nature." "What does he mean by that? Who are you, Uni? Why does Kurama trust you so much and told me to trust you with my story?" As he looked confused, Uni was quiet for several moments as she thought and said, Naruto, I'm not what you think I am. I'm actually a goddess." Naruto said, Are you my mother?" Uni blushed bright red and said, "No. I don't know who your mother is, but I can safely say that I am not anyone's mother." As a sad look came across her face, Naruto said, "Then you're not Aphrodite." Uni tensed before she glared at Naruto and said, "Why would you call me her?" Naruto said, "I don't mean to upset you, Uni, and I just thought that with how beautiful you looked that you could have been Aphrodite until you said you weren't anyone's mother. I know it's impossible for Aphrodite not to have at least one child, since I know she's married and has been dating Ares, or at least that was one of the myths I read about." Uni blushed slightly and said, "Well, I'm not Aphrodite and she does have many children." Naruto said, "So are you Athena? You seem pretty smart despite the fact you didn't have your memories." Uni blushed again and said, "No." Naruto tilted his head to the side and said, "Are you Hestia? You seem to be kind like Hestia was supposed to be." Uni was blushing brightly and said, "Artemis. I'm Artemis." Naruto looked at her and said, "I think those myths are wrong about you, since you don't seem to hate me or turned me into some kind of animal." Artemis frowned and said, "No. Those myths are mostly right about me, but," as she looked down, Naruto got up and walked over and sat down beside her on the bed and gently grabbed her hand and said, "I don't know what's wrong, but you listen to my story, so if you want I can listen to yours, and you can always turn me into an animal later or kill me. It doesn't matter to me." Artemis looked at him shocked and said, "How can you say that?" Naruto looked at her and said, "My dad died and I was expelled from the school in the town I lived because I got into a couple of fight with some bullies who were picking on younger kids. Besides you, the only person in this world I have is my mother, but because of the ancient laws she can't be in my life, and truthfully, I'm mentally 24 years old in the body of an 11-year-old. I won't be with someone who is physically the same age as me because I'll feel like a pedophile. It might take years before I found someone who won't make me feel dirty by being with them, so an odds are I would have to lie about my past and where I come from. That's not something you can build a lasting relationship on. Which means odds are I'll be alone my entire life romantically. The fates agreed to send me here because there's going to be a war sometime in the future and they want me here to help fight in it. I've seen war already. Odds are I'll most likely die in the war, or I'll have to use my full abilities and you and the other gods will see me as a threat and kill me. I've accepted that each day is most likely my last. I've accepted that fate a long time ago. At least if I died after listening to you, I can feel that I died trying to make someone else's life better, which is a good enough reason for me to die." As he smiled sadly at her, Artemis frowned, and then to Naruto's shock she jerked him forward and kissed him on the lips. After getting over the shock, Naruto closed his eyes and returned the kiss. After a few moments and the need to breath, both pulled back slightly and Artemis looked at Naruto in the eyes and Naruto swallowed and said, "Well, that was nice." As he smiled slightly, Artemis smiled gently before her smile faded and said, I used the water on myself. I tracked those monsters down and poured the lethe water on myself because I wanted to die. Naruto eyes widened and asked gently, why? Artemis said, while the legends about me are mostly right, they leave out a lot of very important facts. One of those facts is my father Zeus. He wanted me to marry his son Heracles, who was in fact the poster boy of everything I hate. He proclaimed that if I ever wanted to have a family, then I had marry his champion, who was Heracles. I refused and said that I would rather remain a virgin goddess for the rest of my life than marry that bastard. I had already became the goddess of the moon and the hunt and had already had my hunters, but back then it was mostly made up of abused women and women who had lost their children. After I refused to marry Heracles, the bastard began to hunt down and kill each of hunters, but not before he would have his way with them. I told my father to stop him and he said I had no proof that he was doing it, so I decided there was only one way to prove Heracles was doing what I claimed he was doing, and that was if each of my hunters were in fact maidens, then I could place a protection spell on them that would alert every god and goddess that one was being defiled. Heracles was soon found to be guilty, so Zeus punished him by making him guard the entrances into the ancient lands while we left those lands. Artemis looked down and said, I kept getting only maidens after that so that I could protect them from that fate, but I wanted a family of my own. I have looked at the other gods and goddesses over the years who had children they could brag about, but they would mock me because they knew that if I ever wanted to have a family I would have to marry Zeus' champion, who is still Heracles. He keeps him as his champion in order to keep me from having a family. Naruto asked, have you ever thought about adopting? I know how bad orphans wish to have a mother, and I bet you would be a great one. Artemis had tears in her eyes and said, that's why I did what I did. Over the years I have had seen several children I wanted to adopt to make my own, but each of them have died either in some accident or killed by monsters before I could adopt them. Recently I was returning to camp from hunting when I heard one of my hunters talking. She was talking to my father Zeus. I heard them and he asked the hunter if I was thinking about adopting any other children, and if so who, so he could eliminate them. Naruto eyes widened and wrapped her in a hug as she broke down crying, and Artemis said, I was betrayed by one of my closest friends who I thought I could trust. Do you know what that's like? Naruto closed his eyes and said sadly, yeah, I do. Artemis sniffed and said, how? Naruto, who was still holding her, said, a boy I thought of as a brother named Sasuke. He defected from our village to join another village who was an enemy of our village. The leader of that village offered him power in exchange for joining him. A team was sent out to retrieve Sasuke. Sasuke was my teammate along with a girl named Sakura, who at the time I had a crush on, but she was in love with Sasuke. We were just barely 13 years old at the time, so love wasn't something we truly understood. I was sent on the retrieval team to get Sasuke, but before I left, Sakura begged me to bring Sasuke back. I wound up fighting Sasuke myself. I fought him with everything I had in order to bring him back so that I could keep my promise to Sakura, and Sasuke fought with everything to leave. Our battle was devastating, but in the end I realized the same thing Sasuke realized. The only way Sasuke would come back to our village was dead. Artemis tensed as she heard this, and Naruto said, Sasuke and I used our strongest attacks against each other, but I couldn't kill him because of my promise as well as my own feelings of him being a brother. I powered down my attack and just cut his height while he. Well, it's easier just to show you. As he leaned back, and before Artemis could say or do anything, he pulled off his shirt. Artemis was about to say something when she saw his chest and gasped as she saw a scar near where his heart was, and Naruto said, he was going to kill me but at the last second changed his mind as well, but he didn't power down his attack, just moved it a little so it didn't directly hit my heart. His fist was covered in lightning and it caused me to not only start to bleed to death but also shocked my heart and damaged it. If it wouldn't have been for Kurama, then I would have died. Naruto looked up into Artemis' eyes and said, so yeah, I know what it feels like to be betrayed by someone who you trust and are close to, but ending your life isn't the answer, Artemis. Even if your father is an asshole, you still have so much to live for and so many people who need you. What about the rest of the hunters or the rest of your family? I mean, don't you have a little brother you're close to who needs you, or are the legends wrong about that? Artemis flinched as she heard this and said, Apollo. Naruto said, yeah, him. Look, Artemis. I know I have no right to say anything, but I grew up believing it's the duty of the older generation to protect and look after the younger generation. A friend once told me that in a game of chess, the next generation are the kings and the ones that most important to protect. So how are you going to protect those who need you if you're dead? Artemis looked at Naruto and said, "What about you? How are you supposed to protect those who need you if you're dead?" Huh. Naruto smiled and said, "Then I ask that you don't kill me. Besides, I would like to think we are friends or something. You're the first person to ever kiss me on the lips, so I don't know what that's exactly about. I've been kissed on the cheek and forehead, but those were mostly thank you or passive affection like a grandparent for a grandchild." Artemis blushed as she heard this, and Naruto said, "Besides, there could be a reason your friend betrayed you. Based on what I've read about your dad and what you told me then, it might be possible that your dad may have blackmailed your friend into betraying you, and she only did it to protect you or your hunters or even herself." Artemis frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Naruto tilted his head to the side and said, "Well, you care for your hunters and you might see them as your children, or they may think you see them as your children. What if your dad threatened your hunters? What do you think you would feel if they were to die or be taken away? What if your friend made a deal with him to spare them and to protect you from feeling pain from losing them? I could be wrong. She could just be a traitor who betrayed you for no reason. I wouldn't know since I don't know her. But you do. Which do you think is the most likely case?" Artemis pursed her lips and looked in thought for several moments and said, "It's possible. But still, why didn't she tell me, and what about all those innocent children who died because of her and my father?" Naruto said, "Oh, I don't agree with that, and I feel you have every reason to be angry for yourself and for the innocent lives that were lost, but killing yourself isn't the right thing to do." Artemis looked at him and said, "Then what should be done?" Naruto said, "Well, from what I've read about your dad, he's supposed to be stubborn, arrogant, prideful, vengeful, and a control freak. Would that be pretty accurate?" Artemis said, "And a terrible flirt who can't keep it in his pants." Naruto said, "What do you think he would do if suddenly things became chaotic and one of his children found a way to mock him and broke free of his control in a way that he couldn't lash out or do anything about it?" Artemis blinked and narrowed her eyes and asked, "Why would you ask that?" Naruto smirked and said, "If the people of my birthland knew about you and the other gods, they would swear I was either the son of Hermes, Loki, or Chuaz. I was known as the most unpredictable ninja, as well as being known as the prank master from hell. Kurama said I must be part kitsune because he was in my mother when I was conceived and in me." Artemis said, "Loki was Norse Parthenon." Naruto shrugged and said, "I wasn't for sure. Some thought Loki was just Hermes, but then that would mean Thor was Hercules. Was there really someone named Hercules, or is Heracles and Hercules the same person?" Artemis said, "Different. Heracles is an bastard while Hercules was halfway decent. Truthfully, he's still around and trying to help people learn the truth about Heracles and himself, but he's bound by ancient laws. He's some actor in Hollywood and has a mortal name. But I really don't want to think about either of them." Naruto rolled both his shoulders and said, "It doesn't matter. Anyways, I was thinking, your dad wants you to marry his champion. I've read a little about champions in ancient times, and if they are still pretty much the same, then I got an idea where you could get revenge on your dad and your friend in a way to punish them, where you might even be allowed to find someone you care for yourself or adopt children and not have to worry like you do now. Would you like to hear my idea?" Artemis nods her head slowly, and Naruto's smirk got even bigger, and he said, "Your dad and the hunters don't like males in your life. What do you think they would do if you were to suddenly hang out with a male a lot, but in a way where they couldn't do anything about it?" Artemis said, "And who would this male be, and in what way would this male be in my life?" As she narrowed her eyes even further and pursed her lips. Naruto said, "Well, I was thinking if you don't kill me and we can stay friends, that I could help you get your revenge and help you get what you want most of all. I know gods can't be with their children because of the danger, but can gods be around their champions?" Artemis's eyes widened as she heard this and said, "You want me to make you my champion?" Naruto said, "Just think about it. Besides my mother, the fates, and you, nobody here knows anything about me. You and I can hang out as friends. When people ask why you would hang out with me, you can tell them I'm your champion. The fact you would be spending time with me would piss off your dad, and he would try to find some way to keep us apart. You could even add salt to the wound by saying that you have found a child you're thinking about adopting as your own and want me around to help guard and protect the child when you couldn't because of your duties and the ancient laws. This would make your dad even more upset and want to get rid of me, and your friend would also be upset because she will be pressured to find out who this child is. You can tell your hunters that the only reason you have me is because you want the child you're thinking to claim to be protected, but also know that you are his or her mother since the ancient laws won't allow you to raise the child yourself. That fact there is no current child would make your dad and friend even more frustrated trying to find it. Artemis said. Zeus would be extremely angry about this. Naruto said. Now this is the most important part. Don't flaunt the fact I'm your champion, but if I do something that is impressive like killing some difficult monster or complete some difficult quest for you, then you can brag with your brother or another god in a way that your father or other gods would hear it. The one thing I know about popularity is that you either have to have something that makes you unique or you have to keep doing something to make you remembered. If you could get the other gods to gossip about your champion, sooner or later one of them will compare me to his champion and he will want to get rid of me even more, and eventually he will either confront you or possibly arrange a duel between champions. Artemis seemed to be in thought and said, but you could be hurt or killed. Naruto said, don't worry about me. I'm harder to kill than you think. The fates did bring me from another world to help the gods. Who knows, this might actually be a part of their plan in some way. I mean, look at us. What are the odds that you and I, two very unique people, would meet like we did? If you're want to do this and you're smart about it, then you could make a deal. If your dad confronts you, then use the ancient rules for champion battles. Tell him since he's the one with the problem that you have no reason to accept a champion's battle unless he was willing to give you something, no matter if I won or lost. You can then request the right to freely adopt any child you want. When he asks why you would want that, don't tell him you know the truth about his spy. Instead, tell him you suspect the child you're thinking about adopting might be a child of a god or goddess he doesn't want to live, maybe a child of Poseidon or something. I mean, don't Zeus and Poseidon have some kind of rivalry going on? Artemis' eyes widened as she heard this and said, you're really bound to enrage Zeus, aren't you? Naruto said, yes. To me, a person's word is the most valuable thing they have besides their family and should be protected. Your dad is married, but he's cheated on his wife how many times over the years? No offense meant toward you or your mother. I mean, I don't know anything about godly marriages, but to me marriage is supposed to mean something since all marriages that I know about have vows to each other that are exchanged. I don't think Zeus has kept his vows, and that is why I think Hera is portrayed the way she is in history. In my eyes, Zeus and Aphrodite are the two most vile people in the world because of their cheating ways, and that's not even counting what your dad has done to you. Artemis paled as she looked at Naruto, and after several moments Naruto asked, what? Is there something wrong? As he began to look around. Artemis gulped and said, I don't know. It's just the way you talk about marriage and keeping your word. I wonder if you might be a child of Hera. Naruto tilted his head to the side and said, you think so? Artemis said, I don't know. It might be possible. Naruto looked thoughtful a moment and said, I don't know. I wish I knew for sure. Does the identity of whoever is my mother mean we can't be friends? In a worried tone. Artemis looked at Naruto and said, Naruto, what is it about you that despite all my years of being the way I am, that you can just blast right through my defenses and make me want to be around you? Naruto looked at her and said, I don't know, but you're not the only person that's been that way around me. I've had people who's been my enemy and who should have killed me become some of my closest friends. I've been told by others that I just have a natural presence that makes others feel better as well as want to become better people. I don't understand it. Artemis shook her head and said, I don't know either. The only other person I know who makes others feel like this is, as her eyes widened as she looked at Naruto. Naruto, seeing this, asked, who? Is something wrong? Artemis swallowed a moment and said, I think I know who your mother is, and if I'm right then. Naruto, what are your feelings on friends and family? Naruto looked confused and said, who do you think my mother is and why do you want to know about my feelings toward friends and family? Artemis said, even if I'm right about who I think your mother is, I can't say. It's against the rules. As for the other, humor me. Naruto shrugged and said, family and friends are the most important thing in the world. Money spends, fame fades, places change, The bonds of family will remain no matter how much you don't agree with them. Look at Zeus. I bet right now you hate him some, but he's still your father. Even if you hate him with every fiber of your being, he's still going to be your father. As for friends, true friends are there for you when you're down and they help you help yourself stand back up. My sensei once told me that those who don't follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. But an enemy who later became my friend told me that true strength comes from protecting that which is precious to you. A person should always fight to defend their friends, family, and home, because it's with those things that you gain true strength, because those things are the most important thing to the heart. Artemis, hearing his words and looking into Naruto's eyes and saw the emotions he felt as he spoke them, thought, I can't believe it, but he's yours. I'm sure of it. She smiled and said, and you want me to be your friend? Naruto said, of course I do. I don't care that you're a goddess or anything. To me you're still Uni, the girl I found hanging upside down in one of my traps, who I started to become friends with. Artemis moved closer to Naruto and put her arms around him and laid her head on his shoulder and said, Naruto. I want you to become my champion and my friend. But not because I want to have a family. Not because of who I think your mother is. Not because of what you could do for me. But because you're the most unbelievable, kind, and honorable person I have ever met in all my years. Would you do me the honor of being my champion and be my friend? Naruto smiled and said, you never had to ask. The answer was always yes. As he wrapped his arms around her in a hug. Artemis smiled, and the next moment Naruto felt her lips on his again, and he closed his eyes before he felt a new power flow through his body, shocking him, but he did not flinch or fear this new power. Artemis also felt a new power flow through her body. As Naruto felt the power stop flowing into his body and felt Artemis pull away, he opened his eyes and he saw she was still only a few inches in front of his face, and she said, there. I have gave you my blessing and my friendship. The first man I have befriended in over a couple thousand years. Please don't betray my trust like he did. Saying the last part quietly. Naruto put his hand under her chin and said, I would rather die than betray you, Artemis. That's a promise for eternity. Artemis smiled and laid her head on his shoulder, and Naruto gently held her in his arms. Naruto closed his eyes as he enjoyed the feeling of Artemis in his arms, as he heard her breathing even out as she fell asleep before he also fell asleep. Unknown to either of them, at another location, two pair of eyes were watching them in a shimmering puddle of water. One set of eyes said, so what do you think? The other pair said, yes, I think everything will work out, but only time will tell for sure. Several hours later, Artemis woke up and tensed a moment as she felt herself in someone's arms before her memory returned and she remembered where she was. Shifting slightly, she tilted her head to see the sleeping face of Naruto, and she smiled and reluctantly moved his arms away from her body so she could get up. After freshening up, Artemis came out of the bathroom and found Naruto sitting at the table, and he had laid out the items for a salad that he had got earlier for them. Sitting down, they began to eat, and Artemis said, I'm surprised you don't sacrifice an offering to the gods before you ate. Naruto looked confused and asked, why would I sacrifice this food to the gods? Artemis said, nearly all demigods give an offering to their parent or their patron before they eat, usually the best part of the meal as a thanks, and ask them to look after them. Naruto shrugged his shoulder and said, I'd offer some of this to mom, but I figure she would want me to eat and be strong so I can make her proud through my action, and I already gave you your own plate. Besides, I don't think this is a worthy sacrifice to be given to anyone really. I didn't plant, grow, or pick these vegetables, and I didn't kill the animals the meat came from. If I had done either of those things, then it would be a proper sacrifice because it would be something I worked and sacrificed for. This was just something I picked up at the store for us to eat. Artemis looked at Naruto in shock for several moments before she smiled and said, I have never thought about it like that, but I have to agree. If you were to ever sacrifice anything to me, I ask that it be just as you have stated. Even if it means that I have to wait longer for you to sacrifice something. Naruto smiled and said, of course, Artemis. Before his smile faded a little and said, I should warn you that I have a couple of bad habits you should know about. Artemis blinked a moment before she frowned and said, go on. Naruto looked sheepish and said, First, I don't respect people because of titles or status. If you notice, even though you're a goddess, I'm treating you still just like you were a regular person. When someone has my respect, I usually give them nicknames. Usually a nickname that makes it sound like they are family or at least personal, since I was an orphan in my last life and didn't have any family, or none that I was aware of. It was a way to make me feel like I wasn't so alone. It's a habit I haven't been able to break even now. Artemis looked at him and said, I see. What else? Naruto said, well, I don't like perverts. Artemis said, neither do I, with a smile on her face. Naruto shook his head and said, you don't understand. My birth land, it's different than here. Children start to learn to fight when we are 5 years old, and in some cases even younger than that. It's more of a military lifestyle, but there's a saying there. When you receive your height showing you're a ninja, you're considered an adult. Old enough to kill, old enough to drink, old enough to have their given seduction education starting in their very first year. Teaching them how to use their charm and looks to be able to infiltrate enemy villages or seduce targets in order to capture or interrogate them. Artemis gasped as she heard this, and Naruto looked down and said, there was a family called the Ikirukas. They owned a small ramen stand. When I was young, before I gained the respect of the people of my village, this family was one of the only places I could go to get food. There were times when I couldn't afford to pay anything, and they knew it and would give me a bowl free to eat. Because of this, I considered them to be very close family. Ayame, their daughter, I considered a sister. Her mother was a kunoichi, a female ninja. She was sent on a mission to try and help break up a slave ring. She was raped and killed. I was only 6 years old then, and Ayame was 9. It hurt me to see Ayame and her father in so much pain from losing her. Ayame. She told me what they had done to her mother before they killed her. From that point, I began to hate perverts. Closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, Naruto said, after that I began to use my skills that I was learning to attack perverts. As my skills increased, so did the level of my attacks on perverts. Eventually I created this. As he was covered in smoke, shocking Artemis. When the smoke cleared, Artemis gasped as she saw Naruto was now a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. Naruto smiled slightly and said, I call this Naruto. I learned to make an actual shapeshift, not an illusion like others, but I could physically become what I change into. Tsunade Bakken. She did several tests on this form and she learned that it's possible I could actually become pregnant in this form. Artemis looked shocked and said, are you still a maiden? Naruto changed back into his male form and blushed and said, yes, when I first created that I can say that I was an idiot. I would make perverts pass out from the shock and perverted thoughts. A lot of women didn't like me doing it though, because they felt I was disrespecting women, but after Tsunade Bakken tested it, she asked me about why and how I created it. Once she learned my reason behind it, she saw what no one else saw. She saw it as not only a weapon of attack against perverts but also a weapon of defense against perverts. Artemis tilted her head to the side and asked, what do you mean? Naruto smiled and said, imagine a woman is on a mission and is captured and about to be raped. Imagine that her body suddenly turns from that of a woman to that of a man. My second sensei and I created a seal that could be applied to a kunoichi, where all she had to do was send a small amount of chakra into the seal and she would instantly change from a woman into a man until her body ran out of chakra or she cancelled the seal. Sometimes it could be used to help a woman escape from being captured, but sometimes it at least saved them from being raped while they are alive. Saying the last part sadly. Artemis said, and you created this? Naruto nods and said, I went on a few missions myself after Tsunade Bakken had me take some of the classes that kunoichi had too. I went as backup to help get close to a few targets in order to help other kunoichi, and a few times I went by myself, but the reasons I told you is because I'm sometime impulsive. I do things without thinking, and if I see someone being a total pervert, well, I might just bring Naruto out to play to teach the pervert a lesson. I just didn't want you to be upset with me if I suddenly do it. Artemis asked, have you done it lately? Naruto said, where do you think I got the money for the food we just ate? The day before we met, I was walking through town and I saw this guy who looked to be about 17 picking on this girl around 14 or 15. She was trying to get away from him, but he kept blocking her escape. I decided to help her, so I changed into Naruto and went over to where they were, and I started to flirt with the guy and told him to leave the little girl alone and play with a real woman. The guy followed me over to an ally, and when we were alone, he went to kiss me, and I kneed him in the stomach, kicked him in the balls, and knocked him out before I took his wallet and took out all his cash. I then changed my looks to look like the pervert and went inside a convenience store and acted like a jerk to the clerk, knocking over a couple of shelves, but I dropped the guy's wallet as I walked out so that way when the cops showed up they would know what the guy looked like. Artemis smirked as she heard this and said, I think having you as my champions is going to be one of the best things I ever did. Tell me more about what you have done to perverts. Naruto said. Well, several hours later, Artemis, who was red-faced and sweating from laughing so much, was laying on the bed beside Naruto, who looked like he was also amused, and Artemis said, I can't remember the last time I have laughed so much or so hard. Naruto said, now that's just not right. You have a great laugh and it's good for the soul. Artemis blushed slightly and Naruto looked at the clock and said, well, it's getting late and I don't know about you, but I don't want to stay in a hotel room all the time. We should probably get some sleep. As he started to get up out of bed, Artemis grabbed his arm, stopping him, and she said, stay. Naruto said, but there's only one bed and I'm not letting you sleep on the floor. Artemis said, no. Neither of us are going to sleep on the floor. I trust you, Naruto. I trust that you won't do anything to me while we sleep on the same bed. Naruto said, it's not a good idea, Artemis. I'm clingy. I toss and turn a lot in bed until I find something to cling to like a pillow, and then I hold on with a vice grip. If we slept in the same bed, then I would latch onto you in my sleep and pull you close to me. I also sleep in a pair of boxers, and that's it. Since I have Kurama in me, my body has a higher body heat than normal. Artemis thought, that might not be the only reason. Naruto continued, unknown to Artemis' thoughts, I also have a habit of tossing the covers off of me because of my body heat. Artemis had enough and covered his mouth with her hand, and she said, I'm giving you an order, Naruto. Get ready for bed and get in bed with me. Neither of us are going to do anything but sleep, and if you cling to me, then I have been warned. Now go get ready. Naruto sighed and said, as you wish, as he got up and went toward the bathroom. Artemis blinked as she was alone in the room and thought, what the hell? I've been sitting in front of him for hours without a shirt on and I didn't even think anything about it. If I'm right, you got one special son, Hestia. Artemis was startled as she heard a female voice in her head. You have no idea, Artemis. Know this, hurt him and I'll make you fade. Artemis thought, Hestia, is that you? Where are you? Hestia voice was heard in Artemis' head. Olympus. I have been watching my son every day of his life, and I've been watching you and him since you met. I approve of you making him your champion. I think you both would be good for each other as friends, or maybe someday something more. But please, be cautious with him. He's been hurt in ways that even you couldn't imagine. He was not just saying things earlier. He really doesn't care if he lives or dies. That world. The only reason I do not kill the fates for what they allowed to happen to my son is because they arranged for me to have him and arranged to bring him here. I don't know why he feels that he can trust you so much, but he's been opening up to you more than any other person he has ever known. He's showing you not only his strength but also his weakness, his heart and his loyalty. Artemis, do not take him to camp or the hunt yet. Travel with him a few more days. Forge your bond of friendship. He's going to need it with what he will soon face. Artemis thought, what do you mean? Hestia said, Kurama, he and Naruto are linked. The Shinigami, the god in the other world who helped sealed him in Naruto. They are bound soul to soul. He allowed them to come here, but they made it where Naruto. If he dies, he'll die like a monster and reform. He doesn't know it, but he's like us. He aged until he was in his prime and stopped aging. The fates just made him think he's a child again. Do not tell him the truth. Let him have what little innocence he has left. He knows how to change his appearance. You've seen proof of that already if you need him to change his age and looks. Artemis, there's something else you should know. You're not his only patron. Artemis' eyes widen and she thought, I'm not. Hestia said, no, he doesn't know it yet. It's related to why the fates needed him to be born in that world. Let's just say that when the rest of the council finds out, things are going to change. Just then the door to the bathroom opened and Naruto stepped out in a pair of blue boxers and he said, I'm sorry if I took too long. Artemis got up and said, no, it's all right. I had some stuff I wanted to think about. as she went into the bathroom and thought, in what way will things change? Hestia's voice said, you will have to find out like everyone else. Now go get ready for bed and don't defile my baby boy, you cougar. Artemis' eyes widened and thought, Hestia, I'd never do that. Hestia's laughter was heard in her head and Artemis huffed to herself and began to get ready for bed. Artemis, after freshening up, Artemis was surprised to see a long red and silver silk nightgown appear on the back of the door and heard Hestia say, maybe that joke was too far. This should help keep things from being too rough for you both so you can both sleep. But all joking aside, Artemis, please do not take him to camp or the hunt yet. I'll go to the hunt tomorrow and have Apollo take them to camp, but I will go along to make sure he behaves. I'll tell them that you are on a quest for me and tell them and Apollo not to look for you. Also, don't officially claim him either until I claim him as my son or something happens that forces you to claim him. Artemis thought, when are you going to do that? Hestia was silent a moment and said, soon. Good night and pleasant dreams. Artemis took a deep breath before grabbing the nightgown and putting it on, and she walked out of the bathroom when she was ready. Naruto was sitting on the bed looking nervous and Artemis smiled at him and said, come on, let's go to sleep. As she moved over and climbed into the bed and turned to her side, which she normally slept on, but then blushed as she realized she was facing Naruto, who also turned to his side and was facing her and looking at her worried. Naruto started to open his mouth when Artemis sighed and shook her head and said, look at us. A couple of blushing virgins. Look, you don't plan to do anything and I don't plan to do anything. Let's just both relax and try to get some sleep. Naruto sighed and said, all right, it's just. Artemis asked, just what? Naruto sighed and said, don't leave me. Artemis blinked and looked confused. Naruto got a sad look on his face and said, every time I start getting close to someone they leave or are taken from me. Either by choice or by force. My mother. Father, Gigi. Ero Sanin. Tsunade Bakan. Sasuke Tem. Sakura-chan. Haku. The list goes on and on. Just once. Just this once. Please. Please don't leave me. I'm tired of being alone. Please. As he had tears in his eyes. Artemis felt the pain in his voice and in his look, and she moved forward and wrapped her arms around him and said, if I leave it will only be for a while and I will always return to you, Naruto. As she closed her eyes. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and held her close as he closed his eyes. Both fell into a peaceful sleep. The next morning Artemis blinked as she found herself facing the wall and felt a pair of arms wrapped around her stomach, causing her to tense. As the memories of the last few days returned, she relaxed and a small smile came to her face and she thought, Naruto, what am I going to do with you? Turning her head she saw his face sleeping peacefully and she thought, he looks so peaceful, so innocent. What am I going to do? A little bit later Naruto opened his eyes and felt his hands around Artemis and he quickly moved his left hand that was on top of her while he began to try and pull his other hand out from under her. Artemis shifted and giggled slightly and said, stop, that tickles. Naruto, hearing her voice, said, you've been awake already. Artemis shifted back against him and said, I was comfortable. You're nice and warm and I felt protected. Safe. Wrap your arm back around me. Naruto put his arm back around her and he put his face near her neck and said, you smell nice. Like the rivers and forest. It's relaxing. Artemis said, well, I am the goddess of the hunt. Naruto said, and it looks like you've caught yourself a fox. Artemis said, you're missing the ears and tail. Naruto blinked a moment before smoke covered him and Artemis jumped free of him and looked at him, and when the smoke cleared she went wide-eyed and got a glint in her eyes and said, so you really are a fox? As she saw he had fox ears on his head and a tail wagging behind him. The tail and ears disappeared and Artemis pouted and Naruto said, we should get going. Artemis said, where are we going? I mean, you don't have to find Camp Halfblood. I've been there many times and can take us there quickly. Naruto tilted his head to the side and asked, are we close? Artemis said, about 3 days travel, but I don't want to go there yet. Hestia contacted me and told me that she was going to help my brother take my hunters there until I finished my personal hunt, and I'm not ready to head back. I want to spend some more time getting to know my champion. Let's have some fun. Naruto said, your wish is my command, Haim. I mean Artemis. Artemis blinked and asked, Haim, what's that mean? Naruto blushed and said, It means princess. As he looked down and said, I'm sorry if I upset you by calling you that. To me you're still uni and I told you that. Naruto was stopped when he felt lips on his again and he blinked and closed his eyes and enjoyed the kiss a moment before Artemis pulled away and said, That's sweet of you to say. It makes me feel special. I've had many people suck up to me because of me being a goddess, but you're the first to treat me as a regular person, and I like that. Naruto lowered his head and asked, Why? Artemis blinked and asked, Why what? Naruto said, Why do you keep kissing me on the lips? Artemis looked at him confused and Naruto looked at her and said, I told you I took classes to help me for seduction missions. Everything I knew about you from myth and from what I know of you now makes me confused. Why are you kissing me on the lips? Why something so intimate? Artemis blinked and was about to say something when she heard Hestia in her head say, I told you he's been hurt in ways you can't imagine. He's scared about how easy you have gotten through his emotional defenses and your kissing him makes his defenses fall even faster. If there is ever a time to be honest with yourself and him, it's now. Please be honest with both yourselves this time, niece. Artemis looked at Naruto and thinking about Hestia words she saw what Hestia meant. Naruto's eyes had a look she instantly recognized, the look of a scared animal. Taking a moment to think to herself, she took a deep breath and said, Right now you're scared. You're scared about how easily I am getting through your emotional defenses. I'm also scared because you're getting through mine just as easily. My entire life I have had to live up to other people's belief of who and what I should be and pushed people away from getting to know the real me. When we first met and I had no memory of who I am. I was finally free of everything, now that I got my memories back, and you still treating me basically the same. I feel I can truly be me. I can be happy, sad, angry, hurt, fearful, scared, joy, sorrow, love, hate, and a million other emotions. I can finally be at peace with myself, and it's all thanks to you. Artemis walked over and grabbed his hands in hers and said, For so many years I have bottled up who I really am inside the mold of a virgin goddess, but here, with you. I'm just me, and everything I have bottled up is being released. ... And it's all because of you, the one who sees the real me. I told you before I trust you with my life and my body, well now I am trusting you with my heart and soul. As hard as this is to believe, but I'm falling for you. I'm falling in love with you so hard that I don't think I'll ever be able to stop falling, and honestly, I don't think I want to stop falling. Looking into his eyes, Artemis said, I can't believe that I am saying this, especially with how short of a time that we have known each other, but I am in love with you, and I hope that you are falling for me. Naruto looked into her eyes and the next moment Artemis felt lips on her and was surprised at Naruto kissing her, but she closed her eyes and enjoyed the kiss as he closed his eyes. 16 days later. In a nightclub in NY, Hermes and Apollo were both at the bar getting a couple of drinks and flirting with some women. The girl Hermes was flirting with excused herself to go to the restroom and Hermes looked over at the girl Apollo was flirting with and gave her a look over before he looked out at the dance club floor, looking at the women on the floor before the crowd parted for just a moment, and he saw a blonde hair guy grinding into a red hair woman who was facing away where he couldn't see the woman face but saw the woman grinding her into the guy. Hermes, seeing this, smirked and reached over and tapped Apollo on the arm and said, Hey man, check out the blonde and redhead couple on the floor. They're smoking hot out there. Apollo and the girl he was flirting with both looked out on the floor and Apollo whistled and said, Damn, she's a freak. I think every guy in this place wishes they were in his place. Slap. The girl Apollo had been flirting with huffed and walked away as she heard this, and Hermes laughed seeing the shocked look on Apollo's face, and Hermes said, Burn man. Looks like you're leaving alone tonight. Apollo huffed and said, The night's still young. Damn, look at that. As they looked out at the floor and saw the red-hair woman spun around and wrapped her left leg behind the blonde guy leg and pulled him closer to her as she kissed him deeply while her hair covered her face. Hermes shook his head and turned back to the bar to grab his drink and turned back to look at the floor and took a sip only to spit the drink out as he got a look at the woman's face. The sound of a bar stool snapping was heard next to him as he looked over and saw Apollo standing up with a pissed-off look on his face and his bow in his hand. A female scream was heard through the club, followed by several shouts of gun. Hermes thought, The mist and mortals. as he saw Apollo fire an arrow at the blonde hair man, but both Apollo and Hermes were shocked when the blonde hair man reached up and snatched the arrow out of the air before it could hit him. Both gods saw the red hair woman and the blonde both looked at the arrow and then in the direction the arrow came from, and the red hair woman scowled as she muttered something before she grabbed the blonde's hand and pulled him toward the door. Apollo and Hermes began to go after them. Back on the dance floor a few moments earlier, Artemis and Naruto, who both looked to be 21 years old, kissing on the floor when a scream was heard followed by the word gun. Acting on instinct, Naruto reached up and grabbed an item he senses detecting heading toward him. Both Artemis and Naruto looked at the object and saw an arrow, and both looked where the arrow came from. Artemis scowled and said, "My brother Apollo and his buddy Hermes. Come on, let's go," as she grabbed his hand and began to drag him out the door. As soon as they got outside, Artemis took Naruto to an ally and said, "Close your eyes." Naruto closed his eyes, and the next moment they were in a different location. Naruto opened his eyes and saw they were on a beach, and Artemis scowled as she looked out at the ocean and the moon in the sky, and Naruto said, "Are you all right?" Artemis said, "No, my idiot brother is going to cause us both a headache." Naruto grabbed her hand and said, "We knew it was only a matter of time. The choice is yours on how you want to handle this. I'm with you until I die, and I'll try to find some way to come back to life for you. These past few days have been the happiest of both my lives." Artemis had tears in her eyes and said, "You're not going to die. I won't lose you. I'm not going to be alone. We are not going to be alone," as she wrapped her arms around him and put her head on his shoulder. Naruto pulled her into a kiss which she desperately returned. Just then thunder was heard and Artemis scowled as she pulled back and said, "Damn it. Zeus is calling a meeting. I bet both those bastards ran right to him to tell him about us." Naruto said, "Then let's not keep them waiting. I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to stay with you. You're my most precious person. The people in my old life who knew me knew there was one thing you don't do, and that's with my precious people. You're the most precious thing in my life. I love you." Artemis had tears flowing freely from her face as she kissed Naruto passionately again and said, "I love you also," before she took a deep breath and said, "Let's do this. Close your eyes." Naruto closed his eyes and felt the world shift around him, and as soon as he felt his feet touch solid ground again, he opened his eyes and saw they were standing in front of a huge set of stone doors with stone columns on each side. Artemis squeezed his hand tightly before reluctantly letting go and pushing on the door and said, "Follow me, be quiet, and stand beside my throne," as she entered the doors that she had opened. Naruto began following her into the room and saw 12 stone thrones in the room shaped like a giant U shape with 2 at the head and 5 on each side. Each of the seats were filled with different looking people who looked to be at least 15 feet tall except one, and Artemis quickly began to head toward it as she grew in size and Naruto followed behind her. Many eyes widened at this and a booming voice said, "You dare disrespect the lord of the house," in an angry tone. Naruto looked toward where the voice came from and saw a man wearing a business suit and had a long white beard hanging from his chin, and Naruto started to say something when Artemis said, "Father, he was following my orders. I told him to follow me, stand by my throne and be silent. Would you have him defy my orders?" Zeus glared at Naruto and said, "Who is this boy?" Artemis started to say something when Naruto tilted his head to the side and said, "Boy. Boy. Am I a boy today?" as he looked up at Artemis. Artemis looked at him and said, "Yes." Naruto pouted and said, "I don't feel like being a boy today," as he was covered in smoke shocking everyone, and when the smoke cleared there stood a 16-year-old Naruto in a green silk dress shocking everyone in the room except Artemis and Hestia. Apollo said, "What in the name of Hades?" Athena said, "How did you do that?" Naruto said, "Do what?" with a pout on her face as she turned her head to the side. Aphrodite said, "How did you turn from a guy into a girl?" Naruto said, "How do you know that I'm not a girl who turned into a guy and changed back into a girl? Or am I a guy who turned into a girl who turned into a guy who turned into another girl who turned into another guy? I'm not sure. I guess only my mother, lover, and OBGYN would know for sure. That reminds me, I need to get in and get my yearly mammogram. Would you mind reminding me later?" as she looked at Artemis. Artemis bit her lip to keep from laughing and could only nod her head, and Naruto said, Oh man, now I remember why I was a guy. Pardon me, I need to find the ladies' room. I'm sorry to ask Artemis, but do gods use tampons? I forgot my purse back at the dance club when your brother and his gay lover Hermes interrupted us. Apollo screamed, he's not my gay lover. Naruto said, oh, I didn't know he was your boy toy. Well, whatever floats your boat. I'm sure if you keep it at Hermes that someday Apollo will return your feelings. Hermes sputtered and said, I am not gay. Naruto looked at Artemis, who looked about ready to die, and said, he hasn't come out of the closet yet. Poor thing. We really should give him some support. Artemis, who couldn't keep it any longer, said, come on. I'll show you where the restroom is. As she grabbed Naruto's hand and disappeared in a golden flash. Demeter scratched her head and said, what just happened? Zeus said, I don't know. Poseidon said, brother, why did you call us all here? Zeus looked at Poseidon for several moments before he said, Hestia asked me to call a meeting. Everyone turned to Hestia, who was leaning against the wall and had her hand over her mouth, and said, I've got to go. I'll be back in a moment. As she disappeared in a swirl of flames. Each of the gods looked at each other confused, and Zeus started to say something when a female voice was heard laughing hard, startling all of the gods in the room. Each of the gods got an even more confused look on their face before there was a flash of flames in the middle of the room, and Hestia stood there and sniffed a few times and said, sorry about that. Would you mind summoning Artemis and her companion again? I'll explain why I asked you all here when they get back. As she waved her hand in front of her face, which was red. Hermes said, was that you laughing a few moments ago, Hestia? As Zeus sent a signal to summon Artemis again. Hestia looked at Hermes and said in an innocent voice, I have no idea what you are talking about. Just then Artemis and Naruto appeared back in the room, and Naruto had a pout on his face and Hestia covered her mouth as a snicker was heard. Artemis, who looked like she had been laughing as well, put her fist to her mouth as she looked up at the ceiling. Hestia coughed a few times as she tried to calm herself and said, now that everyone's here, I guess we can get started. Now if Artemis and her guest would please sit down, I would like to explain to everyone why I have asked Zeus to call you all here. Artemis quickly took her seat and Naruto sat down on the ground beside her throne. Hestia said, now I am sure you all have noticed Artemis' guest and have many questions related to him. I know even he has a few questions himself. First, I guess should start off with introducing myself to him. My name is Hestia, but that's not the only name I am known by. In a different land I was known as Kushina. As she sent a gentle smile toward Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened at this while nearly everyone else looked confused. Kushina nods her head to Naruto and said, I know you recognize that name, Naruto, but please stay where you are because there are things you don't know. Things you have been lied to about. Naruto pursed his lips as he heard this, and Kushina looked up at Zeus and said, as you know, brother, I am not an Olympian who has a throne, even though I am the eldest of our siblings. Well, I do have a throne now, just not here. Many eyes widened at this, and Zeus said, what do you mean, Hestia, and what is this disrespectful boy here for? Hestia narrowed her eyes and said, you should be careful about how you address the son of Lord Chaos, brother. Especially in front of his mother. As she crossed her arms. Many gasps went through the room, and everyone in the room looked at Naruto in shock while Naruto was looking at Hestia completely confused. Zeus said, what are you talking about, Hestia? Hestia looked at Zeus and said, Naruto, why is there an ancient law that prevents gods from raising their demigod children? Naruto blinked and said, because the longer a demigod is around their godly parent, the more their scent increases along with their powers, which could ultimately destroy their bodies. Hestia looked at Naruto and said, I'm the eldest child of Kronos and spent the most time in his belly. That means that my scent is stronger than all of my siblings, as well as my own powers are raised higher than any others. I made a vow many years ago that I would not marry because I knew that any child I had would have a scent that would attract monsters faster than 100 demigods together. Your father silently watched over this world and saw me and the kindness and devotion I had to my family, and he knew my greatest wish was to have a child, just like his own wish was to have a child, so he created a way where we both could have our greatest wish. Hestia smiled at him and said, Your father had the fates come to me and tell me that because my little brother Zeus over there and my other brother Poseidon broke an oath on the river Styx that 3 dangers were coming that would most likely result in the death and destruction of everyone and everything I cared about. The fates told me that there was a way to try and prevent this, but I had to be willing to make a sacrifice. And you should know, since you are my son, that I would be willing to sacrifice anything to protect what is precious to me, just like you are. Naruto smiled at her a little and Hestia said, the elemental nations, the land that you were born in, it's where the souls of all immortals who have faded go when they leave their realms. Not just this world but every world where life exists. The fates sent me there and I was reborn as a mortal female child like all who fade. When you fade, all your memories of your past life disappear. It was there that I met your father. Like me, he had no memories and was mortal as well, but the fates made it where it was love at first sight on his part. Being the god of creation has its perks, but eventually he was able to make me fall in love with him and we had you. Naruto said. But, Hestia said, let me finish, son. You're probably going to hate this part, but your father knew that I had to return to my responsibilities and he had to return to his. The only way a fated immortal can return from the fade is if they are willing to give their life selflessly for the safety of an innocent. Your father had gave the fates orders that sometime after you were born that we were both to be placed in a situation to where we would have to give our lives to save the lives of another. Your father was supposed to die the day you were born when the masked man kidnapped you and took Kyuubi from me, but I was supposed to live and raise you until I died and then later you were to die and selflessly and come here. You don't know it, but your father, he had the fates have Kyuubi placed in me so that when you were born that his influence in me and later in you would help cover your scent in order to protect you. Hestia closed her eyes and said, I screwed all that up. I reacted without thinking and died trying to protect you just like he did and left you alone. If I hadn't have reacted and let things play out, I would have been there to raise you and protect you and you would never have had to suffer like you did. It's my fault. I'm the reason you had to go through the hell you did and for that I'm sorry, Sochi. As she looked down. Naruto got up and moved toward Hestia and Hestia stiffened as she felt Naruto pull her into a hug and he whispered, I could never hate you, Okazen. Hestia burst into tears as she heard this as she wrapped her arms around him and her form began to change into that of Kushina as she pulled him close to her. As mother and son embraced, the other Olympians looked at each other in confusion and after a few moments Naruto pulled back from Hestia who smiled and Naruto asked, but if dad is chaos like you said, then. Hestia smiled at him and said, then what about the last 7 years? I told you, son, all immortals who have faded go to the elemental nations. You were trained to be a sage and were Jiraiya's successor. Jiraiya was actually a god from this world before he was reborn there. And this is the part that is going to cause someone here some pain and sadness, but the place you've been living the last 7 years, it was a sanctuary created by Jiraiya before he died and left this world when he faded. Jiraiya made you his successor and, well, son, with the powers you inherited from both your father and me as well as the blessing of Jiraiya, you would be a god. But you still have Kyuubi help hiding your scent and keeping most of your power sealed away until you can fully control the power you have flowing through you. When you have fully absorbed it and can handle your full powers, you will become a god. Most likely an Olympian, but that will be several thousand years from now at least. Zeus screamed. What? I do. Lightning struck Zeus, causing him to fly out of his throne and fall to the ground, and Hestia said, remember your place, brother. My husband is watching. He may not be able to directly interfere, but he sure the hell can indirectly through his agents, and I will side on the side of my husband and son. Do you want to make me an enemy, brother? Especially since we still have the 3 dangers that you and Poseidon caused coming after us. Zeus grunted as he slowly stood up with smoke coming off his body and he looked up at the sky in shock and he frowned as he sat down on his throne. Hestia smirked to herself before she turned her head and looked at a blonde-haired man, and her smirk fell and said, I'm sorry, Hermes, but this next part is going to be hard for you to hear. Jiraiya, the man I mentioned who made Naruto here his successor. It's Pan. Several gasps went through the room and Hermes paled as he got a sad look on his face and said, Pan's gone. Hestia looked at Hermes and said, he was chasing a NYMP that he fell in love with and he chased her through the woods and caused her to fall into a hole that fell into the labyrinth. He went down after her and she, though he was still chasing her, and they both got lost down in the labyrinth, and when she died down there he blamed himself. He was able to find his way out, but her death hurt him and he decided life wasn't worth living if he could just walk away and live while the life of an innocent perishes because of him. In the other world he still chases her, but he still hasn't caught Tsunade, has he Naruto? As she looked at Naruto. Naruto eyes widened and said, Tsunade the nymph pervy sage chased after, that makes so much sense now, but. Hestia said, your father has made it where they will always be reborn, where he can chase after the woman he loves until he captures her heart and they live happily ever after together. It may take 100 lifetimes, but eventually the old toad will get the slug. Naruto got a sad smile on his face and Hermes said, he's happy. Naruto looked at Hermes and said, he's probably right now peeping at women at a bathhouse somewhere writing and chasing after the woman he loves. Several chuckles were heard and Hermes said, that does sound like my son. So, Naruto. Weird name. Naruto is now the lord of Pan's domains. As he looked at Hestia. Naruto looked at Hestia as well and Hestia said, yes. For the last 7 years his father once more took the form of a mortal in order to give Naruto a second childhood with one of his parents in order to help Naruto learn to use his powers to be able to take over his duties while hidden in one of the last sanctuaries created by Pan. But that's not the only job he has, is it Artemis? As she looked at Artemis. Artemis blushed slightly as she looked at Hestia and said, no. He's also my champion. Causing several gasps to go through the room. Zeus screamed, no, I forbid. A yellow flash appeared in the room and Zeus disappeared and another yellow flash appeared in the room in the air above and a crash was heard as Zeus impacted into the floor and a figure appeared on top of the body of Zeus and grabbed the arms of Zeus and pulled back and a pain gasp was heard from Zeus' lips as he was pulled back and the figure on top of Zeus said, what was that you said? I couldn't hear you. Speak up, oh brother-in-law of mine. Zeus gasped in pain as his eyes locked onto a figure who looked a lot like Naruto wearing a white cape with red flames on it. Naruto gasped and said, Dad. Minato Namikaze, also known as Chaos, looked over at Naruto and said, hello son, sorry about this but your father-in-law and I need to have some time to talk, have a few drinks, talk about life. Why don't you take your wife and go have some fun? Naruto blinked and Hestia slapped her head and said, Minato, I haven't told them about that part yet. Minato blinked and said, really? Well, I'll make it simple. Right now you have both your father Kronos and Gi both starting to rise because of the broken oaths Zeus here and Poseidon made. Just like you have a Greek and Roman form, I have 2 forms. Chaos and order. As chaos I can give you some help. As order I have to punish you for breaking those oaths. Now as I said, as order I have already ordered the fates to arrange for Gi and Kronos to rise in the near future. I can send one more danger. I had a choice, I could either send Oranos to attack you also on top of the other 2, which would most likely result in all of your deaths. Minato pulled back on Zeus' arms making him gasp out in pain and Minato said, or since it was Zeus here that broke the oath twice I could just make it where only he is punished somehow. I made it where when Artemis was returning from one of her hunts she would learn the truth about a lie that has been hidden from her for many years. I allowed her to return without being detected and she overheard you and your little spy you have been blackmailing all these years talking Zeus. I figured that Artemis would be the third danger that only you would face Zeus. I admit even I could not have expected what happened next to happen. I thought she would try to kill you and you would either die or start a war between the gods with those who side with her against those who side with you. Boy was I wrong. Minato looked at Artemis and said, Artemis, do you admit that you willingly and freely allowed Naruto to give you some of his power? Artemis nods her head and Minato looked at Naruto and said, do you admit that you willingly and freely allowed Artemis give you some of her power? Naruto nods and Minato said, and do you both admit that you willingly and freely kissed each other? Causing several gasps to happen in the room and Apollo to glare at Naruto. Both Naruto and Artemis blush but nod and Minato said, you both don't realize it since you never had a champion before Artemis and you didn't realize you were the equivalent of a god but you both didn't make each other champions. You gave each other minor powers over all of your domains. Naruto is now also a minor god of the moon, hunt, animals, childbirth, and maidens. Artemis is now also a minor goddess of the flock, the wild, hunting, and music. Artemis has also gained an immunity to fire and can use fire, water, earth, wind, and plants. This is your punishment, Zeus. Naruto is my son and Artemis is my daughter-in-law or under my protection Zeus. You will not try and force Artemis to marry jerk Yules or harm any children they may decide to adopt or have. If you don't want them or my wife Hestia to be here then fine, I already have seats on my own council for them. If they ever get tired of life on this world I have an entire universe created to let them explore and enjoy while I let my other half bring death and destruction to this world. Do you understand me? As he pulled back on Zeus' arms while putting pressure on his back with his feet. Zeus cried out in pain and Minato said, I can't hear you. Zeus said, yes. Minato said, good. Before he slammed his fist into the back of Zeus' head knocking him out. Minato let go of Zeus and clapped his hands acting like he was knocking off dust and Minato looked around the room and said, as I'm sure you all can figure I am Chaos but I prefer to go by the name Minato and. He was stopped by a punch from Naruto that sent him through a wall causing everyone in the room to look shocked and Naruto said, jerk. Minato came back through the wall rubbing his jaw and said, I deserved that, and the other punch you gave me I also deserved. Naruto said, you made me believe you died. Minato said, I can only do so much son. Every second I am here your scent and powers are increasing. You're already stronger than your mother so you don't have to fear being around her because she can't cause your scent to get any stronger but out of respect for the rest of her family who doesn't have the same advantage that you have with Kyuubi. Naruto said, he has a name. Minato said, names are power son. I know his name because I gave it to him but anyone who knows his name might be able to take him from you which can cause your death. He asked me to stay with you and guard you when I arranged for you to come to this world. You earned his respect and trust. He respects me for creating him but he doesn't respect me because of the pain and suffering that I have caused you and others. You have no idea how many universes that I have destroyed when I was younger out of my own ignorance and arrogance. Back when I was one being before I became order and chaos. How many lives I created and destroyed in the blink of an eye. My presence here is destroying this world because it can't contain me. That is why I had to become immortal to be here and why I am immortal now. When I leave here this time I'll be back in my true form and I won't be able to come back. Not until this world has had a chance to recover, but don't think that means you can test me Zeus. I may not be able to directly be here but I can still use the fates or others to do my bidding. As he kicked Zeus who was pretending to be still out. Zeus grunted as he rubbed his stomach and stood up glaring at Minato who said, don't try me Zeus. I don't respect you and would gladly see you die and cease to exist. If it wasn't for me falling in love with Hestia and wanting to see her happy I would have been happy to sit back and let Kronos, Ge, and Uranus destroy you. It's only because of my love for her and our mutual desire to have a child that I am giving you even a breath of my attention. Hestia, Naruto, and his new wife Artemis are the only ones I care about on this planet. You do not want to see what I can do if I truly become angry Zeus. You do not want to see what I am like when I become order. Those three are no longer under your control and are free to do as they wish. Do you understand me Zeus? I just defeated you and had you at my feet in a mortal body. Do you want to see what I can truly do Zeus? Zeus who was glaring at Minato, flinched at the coldness in his eyes and the power he could feel coming off Minato and looked away and said, very well. They are no longer welcomed here. Artemis gasped as she heard this and Hestia said, is that the will of all of you or just you Zeus? Choose. Zeus looked at Hestia angrily and Hera said, he does not speak for me sister. It's his fault we have to deal with Father and Mother Earth again. As she glared at Zeus. Hermes said, you do not speak for me either Father. Apollo frowned and said, I side with my sister, but I don't side with her husband. Artemis smiled at the first part and glared at him at the last and said, deal with it. I happily accept Naruto as my husband. Poseidon said, I admit that I broke my oath but it was out of love, not lust like you brother and I will not lose Hestia because of you. Athena said, I'm sorry Father but we need all the help we can get if we are to survive the coming threats. Zeus glared at them as he saw the other Olympians looking ready to agree with Hestia and Minato and said, fine. Artemis can keep her seat but both Hestia and Naruto cannot speak unless directly spoken to while we have meetings. Naruto smirked and looked at Artemis and his smirk got bigger as Artemis smirked a little and said, so husband, how does it feel to be married? Causing Zeus to glare at her and Naruto said, feel nice and I have to say I got the most beautiful woman I have ever met as a wife. Don't you agree, Mom? Hestia realized what they were doing said, oh, I couldn't agree more, son, and I approve of the marriage between you both. So when can I expect grandbabies? Naruto and Artemis both blushed while Minato laughed at that and said, well, I must be going. Goodbye, son. I must be going, but know that I will be watching. And Naruto, as my son, you have the power to challenge the fates. If the fates say someone will die, you might be able to prevent their death, not always but sometimes. You're not bound by the ancient laws of this world since you weren't born here. You can freely fight any battle you choose to fight. As he walked over and gave Naruto a hug before he turned to Hestia, who smiled at him before he dipped her back, giving her a passionate kiss, causing Aphrodite to giggle. After he stood her back up, Minato whispered in her ear and she looked at him and nods her head, and Minato stepped back from Hestia and looked at Artemis and said, I bless your marriage and wish you both a long and happy life. Goodbye. As he disappeared in a yellow flash, Artemis grabbed Naruto's arm and said, bye. As they both disappeared in a golden flash, Zeus glared at where they were before he suddenly found himself pinned to his throne as Hestia stood there with her arms crossed and chains coming out of her body, and she said, don't even think about it, little brother. I will not let you or anyone hurt my son and ruin his happiness. Artemis and he both make each other happy, and I will see Olympus burn before I see you ruin that. Do I make myself clear? As a shadowy figure appeared behind her, an evil-looking Kushina floated in the air, as smacking her fist as she glared at Zeus, who turned pale in fright as he nods his head. Hestia smiled and said, I'm glad you agree. Do you understand that message as well, Apollo? If you try to kill my son again, I'll make you wish you were dead. As she glared at Apollo. Apollo and everyone else in the room saw the shadowy Kushina in the air grinding an axe against a grinding wheel above Hestia, and everyone nods, and Hestia said, good. I'm glad we could all agree. As she shrank back to her 9-year-old form and the shadowy Kushina disappeared, as Hestia went back over to the fire with a tender smile on her face. At that moment, everyone in the room had one thought: don't piss off Hestia. Naruto and Artemis appeared in the woods, and Artemis quickly turned toward Naruto and said, did you know about any of that? Naruto looked at her and said, I swear on everything, Artemis, I did not know anything about Pan making me his heir, my father being Chaos, my mother being Hestia, or about the fated immortals, and I already told you I was expecting to most likely die in the coming war being alone. I've never had plans for marriage because they were always a fantasy because of the hate and fear I had because of Kurama. Artemis pursed her lips and she said, do you regret being married to me? Naruto looked at her and said, only the fact that it was forced on us and we had no say in it. Truthfully, I'm not going to act like we are married unless you want to be married to me, and that is after we date each other a while and then you will have a wedding. If you don't want to be married or want to change things from how they were before we went to that meeting, then that's fine with me. At least you can now adopt any child you want, even if it didn't happen the way we thought it would. I'm happy you can finally get to be a. He was silenced by Artemis pressing her lips to his. Artemis ran her fingers through his hair as Naruto ran his hands gently up her back as they kissed each other. Several hours later, Naruto and Artemis were watching the sun rise in the east as they sat on a mountaintop, and Naruto said, so what now? Artemis, who had her head on his shoulder, said, I think it's time that we reveal to the world who you are. Naruto smiled gently and said, your wish is my command, dear. Artemis reached up and kissed him gently before she pulled back and said, after we deal with the Crooked One and Mother Earth, I want to have that wedding, Naruto. Until then we will date, and then after we are married, I want to have our children. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked at her in shock and said, are you sure? Artemis nods and said, I've never been more sure of anything else in my entire life. A female voice behind them said, I'm glad to hear that. Causing both Naruto and Artemis to freeze and turn to look behind them, and saw Hestia standing there looking like Kushina along with Chaos looking like Minato. Naruto stood up and said, what are you both doing here? Hestia said, we are both here because it's time you both learned the entire truth. Both Naruto and Artemis looked confused, and Minato said, Zeus doesn't have 2 children. He has 42 children. He's broken the oath 42 times. Both Artemis and Naruto went wide-eyed at this, and Artemis said, but. Hestia said, all this up till now has been a test, Artemis. Well, mostly a test. When I left this world and went to the world Naruto was born in, Zeus only had 2 children. Over the last several years, Zeus has shown exactly why he is the king of the Mile High Club. Naruto looked confused and Minato said, Zeus is the lord of the sky, Naruto. The Mile High Club is the name given to anyone who has while flying. Zeus uses the mist to appear on planes where women he find attractive and if they are married he uses the mist to make himself look like their husbands in order to trick them into having on the plane with him, or if they are single he uses the mist to help seduce them for the same thing. Even as we speak he is flying over Indiana screwing a brown-haired woman. Because of all the broken oaths, this world has only 2 options. Be destroyed by all the hell order will have to release, or I will have to rewind time back to before he broke the oath more than twice and then curse him, making him unable to have any more children. Hestia said, that brings us to why we have been testing you, Artemis. Artemis looked confused and said, me? Why me? Hestia looked down and said, when my husband rewinds time, Naruto's going to be thrown back into the life he had in the elemental nations, and you will forget about him. Naruto looked shocked and hurt and Artemis looked upset as well and said, that's not fair. I don't want to forget about the only man I've come to love. Isn't there any way you can prevent him having to go back and make it where we can stay together? Hestia glanced at Minato who said, that's why we've been testing you. To see if your feelings were strong enough to be willing to do what it takes to be with our son. I'm glad to see that they are, because I would have erased his memories of you as well so he wouldn't have felt the pain of losing you, but it comes at a price. Naruto frowned and asked, what price? Minato looked at Naruto and said, there is nothing I can do to keep you from being sent back to the elemental nations, and unless you die a hero's death you won't be able to come back here, well, unless you became immortal there. Those are the only 2 ways to escape the elemental nations. Hestia said, this is where Artemis is going to have to make a choice. A choice I once made. Artemis, if you really want to be with Naruto you will have to leave this world and go to the elemental nations. Minato said, I promise you that if you agree to this I will make it where you remember everything, both of you, so that you can be together and live a life there and either try to die heroes' deaths to come back here or gain immortality. Artemis frowned and said, what about my life here? People will notice me missing and look for me. Hestia said, no, they won't even know you're gone because there will be an Artemis here. The Artemis from the past. When time goes back all those who died from that point till now will be alive again, and since you and Naruto will leave here it will be just as if you both were dead and the past you will take your place. Artemis frowned and Naruto said, but what if she makes it back? What about her past self? Hestia said, they will merge together just like I merged with my past self when I was returned here after I died. Naruto looked at Minato and said, doesn't that mean that you both can come with us? That we can be a family? Minato looked at Naruto sadly and said, if I leave then I'll be unable to prevent this world being destroyed and all the innocent people dying because one man couldn't keep his word or his pants up. Hestia looked down and said, as much as I would love to go back with you son I can't. If I do then I won't be able to come back unless I gain immortality or die a hero's death, and just like your father would have erased your memories to make you forget the pain of losing Artemis, Order would erase Chaos memories in order to make him forget the pain he feels from losing me. I wife's place is with her husband. I hope you agree with that, Artemis. Naruto saw both Minato and Hestia looking at Artemis and Naruto said, stop that. Don't force her to. He stopped talking as he felt a hand on his shoulder and he turned and looked at Artemis who smiled gently at him and said, she's right Naruto. A wife's place is by her husband's side. I agree. I want to be with you but I don't want to see innocent lives lost because my father can't keep his in his pants. I'll go with you. Naruto asked, are you sure? Life there is not like it is here. You could die. Minato saw Artemis smile at Naruto and she said, I would rather die than live without you in my life Naruto. I love you and I want to be by your side for the rest of my life. I want to be there when you open your eyes and when you close them. I want to be the mother of your children and the one you lean on when you can't stand on your own. Naruto had tears start flowing from his eyes as he put his hands on both sides of Artemis' face and kissed her tenderly. As the kiss broke, Minato said, well, if that is all then I need to explain a few rules. First, since you are going to keep your memories and you know some of what could happen Naruto, You are not allowed to tell anyone about the future except Artemis, and you can only do that when you speak in your minds. Artemis knows what I am talking about and help teach you how to do this. Artemis, you will be born as a baby girl in Konoha where Naruto is. You might be a few months older or younger, but I can't tell for sure. Artemis nods her head and Minato said, you will be mortal, both of you will be. Naruto will have Kyuubi in him still. You both will have to learn to control your power and become stronger. Your godly blessings and strength will not work, or they won't work right away. You might be able to unlock them, but I can't say for sure. Naruto said. How can you not know for sure? Minato looked at Naruto and said. A 5-year-old Naruto Uzumaki was walking down the street with his hands in his pocket when an elderly voice said, hey you. Boy. Naruto blinked and looked over toward where he heard the voice come from and saw an old man sitting on a rocking chair in front of a store, and the man said, yeah, you boy, come here. Naruto frowned and said, why? The man said, look kid. I've heard you're an orphan. That you have no family, and rumor is that the orphanage matron is trying to get you kicked out. If she kicks you out, what are you going to do? You have no home, no money, and no family to help you. Naruto pursed his lips and the man said, if you look at me you can see I only have one arm and a couple of bad legs. If I don't get some help I'm going to go out of business and be just like you are going to be, no home, money, or family. So I was thinking kid, I need help, you need help. You help me, I help you. Naruto blinked and looked at the man and said, what could I do and what could you do for me? The man said, my name is Andre. I don't have a family name. What I could do. A 5-year-old Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes and blinked as he found himself inside a sewer-looking place and thought, what the? How did I get here? As he looked around. Calling out several times, Naruto began to explore the sewer he found himself in. Soon he came to a large room with a huge gate with a piece of paper with lines drawn on it holding the gates closed. Naruto blinked as the lights in the area got brighter and Naruto could see the form of a woman with red hair and green eyes. The woman turned toward Naruto and her eyes slowly moved over his body from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet and then back up to the top, and when her eyes met Naruto she smiled sadly and said, I didn't expect this to be how we would meet Naruto. Naruto eyes widened and said, how do you know my name? What's going on? Where are we? The woman said, my name is Kushina. As for what's going on and where we are, that will take a little bit of time and is a very long story. Would you like to hear it? I promise you that it will explain everything. Naruto looked at her a moment and asked, why are you behind those bars? Kushina said, it's part of the story I want to tell you. May I tell you the story? Naruto said, all right I guess. Kushina smiled and said, in order for you to understand this story you need to understand the world revolves around the 3 P's. Power, pleasure, and pain. Everything anyone ever does is for one of those 3 reasons. Do you understand so far? Naruto shook his head no, and Kushina said, Naruto, do you know what a demon is? Naruto said, like Kyuubi. Kushina smiled slightly and said, yes, like Kyuubi. Many years ago, Kyuubi was just a small fox demon who lived in another world named Makia. That world was just like this one where everything revolved around the 3 P's. Humans from this world in search of power for themselves created doorways that connected this world and Makia so they could come to Makia and capture the demons that lived there and steal the demons' power for themselves to make themselves stronger. The demons of Makia did not like their home world being invaded and their people being either kidnapped or killed, so they began to fight back and were able to chase the humans out of Makia back to this world. Are you with me so far? Naruto tilted his head to the side and said, I think so. Kushina said, don't worry. I'll explain better for you later. Now, as I was saying, the demons of Makia fought back against the human invaders and came to this world. Among them was the fox demon you call Kyuubi. Now the humans, seeing that the demons were fighting back, tried to close the doorways between world but couldn't, but they could block them so that the more powerful demons couldn't come here. But it also made it where the demons here couldn't get back to their home. Can you imagine that, Naruto? First having someone invade your home and attacking you, your friends, and family, and then when you fight back trapping you where you could never go back home. Would you like that? Naruto frowned and said, no. Is that why Kyuubi attacked Konoha? Kushina sighed and looked to her left a moment and said, "You see Naruto, the only way for a demon to truly die is if they lose all of their power, which is why demons try to get stronger so they can live longer. When the humans trapped the demons here, they started to trap the weaker demons and taking their power and their lives before going after the more powerful demons. The Kyuubi is one of the few who got strong enough to live until right before Konoha was formed. There were 3 clans who had the power to be a danger to the Kyuubi. The Senju clan, who had the ability to suppress a demon's chakra, making it easier to capture them. The Uchiha clan, who had the ability to control a demon's mind, making them unable to fight back, and finally the Uzumaki clan, who had the ability to capture demons and bind them. Naruto's eyes widened and Kushina looked at Naruto and said, "When Konoha was formed, Madara Uchiha had used his power to make the Kyuubi his slaves so that the Kyuubi would attack Uchiha clan's rival, the Senju clan. The Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan allied together, and the Senju clan suppressed the Kyuubi chakra long enough for the Uzumaki clan to capture the Kyuubi and seal the Kyuubi into the wife of the Shadaime Hokage Hashirama Senju. The woman who the Kyuubi was sealed in was named Mito Uzumaki Senju." Naruto was shocked hearing this, and Kushina said, "Mito and Hashirama had one son who married a woman from the Yamanaka clan, and they had 2 children named Tsunade and Nawaki. Nawaki was killed and Tsunade became very depressed after her brother's death and began to drink a lot and wound up becoming pregnant with a child. Because of Tsunade's depression as well as how young Tsunade was and all the enemies the Senju clan had caused Mito to take the baby boy that Tsunade gave birth to and hid him after giving him an Uzumaki male name. The males of the Uzumaki clan are named after some connection to water. The baby boy was named Minato." Naruto listened with wide eyes as Kushina continued. "Mito, as she neared the end of her life, sent word back to Whirlpool Country, the home of the Uzumaki clan, and they sent a female named Kushina Uzumaki to come to Konoha in order to take control of holding the Kyuubi prisoner inside of her." Naruto's eyes widened even more and said, "Is that you?" Kushina smiled slightly and said, "No." Kushina was not as strong as Mito was, and when they tried to switch the Kyuubi from one to the other, Kyuubi managed to escape and killed both women. Naruto frowned hearing this, and Kushina said, "The Kyuubi knew after it killed both women that she had to be careful or she would become a prisoner again or a slave to the Uchiha clan, so she changed her looks to look like Kushina and pretended to be Kushina Uzumaki, waiting for a chance to escape in order to live. Luckily for Kyuubi, Whirlpool Country was destroyed by another village during the war and she was able to hide here in Konoha easier, and then one day Kumo came and kidnapped Kushina because they wanted the Uzumaki bloodline. But that was when Kushina was rescued by Minato, Mito's great-grandson." Naruto said, "She was. What happened?" Kushina smiled and said, "Well, Kushina and Minato over the next 3 years became good friends, and then one day Minato asked Kushina to marry him." Naruto said, "He did?" in an excited voice. Kushina said, "Yes." Kushina, over the 3 years they had became close friends, had fell in love with Minato, but she knew that she would have to tell him the truth, so she told him who she really was. She told him about the humans coming to Makia and the trapping the demons who came here, and about her being the Kyuubi, and that she was the one who killed his great-grandmother and distant cousin. And the most shocking thing of it all was he didn't care. He loved her enough that he didn't care that she was a demon. They got married, and then one day they found out that Kushina was going to have a child they wanted to name Naruto. As she looked at Naruto's eyes, Naruto looked at her a moment before his eyes went wide and said, You're my mother, you're the Kyuubi." Kushina said, "Yes, son." Naruto fell on his butt while moving his lips several times and said, "But why did you attack Konoha?" Kushina said, "The day you were born, an enemy ninja attacked and kidnapped you. Your father went to rescue you, but while he was doing that, the real enemy ninja had returned and kidnapped me. I fought back against him and created a clone to tell your father. The ninja had the same bloodline as the Uchiha clan and used it to force me into my full demon form and forced me to attack Konoha. Your father was able to rescue you and free me from the control of the enemy ninja. After that, in order to protect you and me, he sealed me inside of you. Right now we are inside your mind." Naruto looked around and said, "Why does my mind look like this?" Kushina smiled and said, "Well, if you were a few years older I would jokingly say something about you being a pervert. but your mind looks like this because you're always depressed and sad because people know that I am sealed in you and they think if they make you hurt then I will be hurt also. They're right about that but not for the reasons they think. I hurt because I am your mother and wish I could be there to protect you. As she looked down at the end. Naruto frowned and Kushina said, but the people of this world are going to learn a hard lesson, son. Never make an enemy out of a demon. Especially one who is a mother, as a smirk appeared on her face. Time skip 3 years later. The Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi was in his office doing paperwork when a female voice said, "Hello Sandaime Hokage." Hiruzen blinked and looked up and saw a woman in a white dress standing in the corner of his office, but since she was facing away from him all he could tell about her besides her dress was that she had red hair. Hiruzen said, "Hello. Sorry if this sounds rude but who are you and how did you get in this office?" The woman said, "I am one of the 12 guardian ninja of the Fire Lord. For security reasons I cannot tell you my real name but you may call me Lily. I am facing away from you because I have a mask on to hide my true identity and I did not want you to think that I was an enemy ninja here to attack you. May I turn around now and face you?" Hiruzen said, "Yes." Lily turned and Hiruzen saw she had a mask that was red with a white lily painted on it. Hiruzen cleared his throat and said, "Now may I ask why you are here?" Lily said, "I am here on behalf of the Fire Lord. You should know that right now everything we are saying is being heard by the entire village. The Fire Lord wanted to make sure that you and everyone in the village has been notified on this so if someone has to be punished later they can't say they didn't know. Do you understand?" Hiruzen frowned and said, "Yes, I understand." Lily said, "Good. Now the reason I am here is because of your actions Sandaime after the Kyuubi attack on Konoha 8 years ago as well as the actions of many of the people of Konoha could be considered treason against the Fire Nation." Hiruzen's eyes widened and he said, "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Lily said, "If you look at the symbol of Konoha you will notice that it is a leaf with a whirlpool in the middle. You are old enough to know that the whirlpool symbol refers to the village of Whirlpool or more specifically the Uzumaki clan of Whirlpool. The symbol of Konoha was created by the Fire Lord at the time of Konoha founding as a pledge that the people of Konoha would protect the Uzumaki clan because the Uzumaki clan has been performing an S-rank mission for the Fire Nation since before Konoha was even founded." Hiruzen gulped slightly and Lily said, "Now I am going to give you some background information about the Uzumaki clan before I give you the information about the mission. You see the Uzumaki clan has a bloodline. Many believe that the Uzumaki bloodline is called special chakra because their chakra is 10 times stronger than normal chakra. That is actually only a side effect of what the Uzumaki bloodline actually is. The Uzumaki bloodline allows an Uzumaki to drain the chakra from a demon and purify it to make it their own chakra. The reason this is important is because the only way to kill a demon is to completely drain it of its chakra. If you don't drain it of its chakra then it will slowly heal itself over time until. Now I will explain about the mission." Lily put her hands on her hips and said, "The Uzumaki clan and Hashirama Senju were given a mission at the time to travel across the elemental nation and using the Hashirama ability to suppress demon chakra and the Uzumaki clan knowledge on sealing demons to capture as many demons as they could and then drain them of their chakra and kill them. The first part of the mission was a success and the over 20,000 demons were captured and hidden in what you now call the Forest of Death. That forest was created using Hashirama Mokudan ability so the forest would suppress the demon's chakra while the Uzumaki clan placed a barrier around it that would make it where the demons that are trapped inside that forest couldn't escape." Hiruzen said, "Are you saying that the unusual creatures that live in the Forest of Death are actually demons?" Lily said, "Yes. Before Whirlpool was destroyed the Uzumaki clan had successfully killed over 4,000 demons, however that isn't important right now. You see, with that many demons, even suppressed, a barrier strong enough to keep all of them from being able to escape that forest would have to be extremely powerful. This is where the Uzumaki bloodline really came in effect and where you and the people of Konoha action could be considered treason." Taking a deep breath Lily said, "You know that Mito Uzumaki Senju, wife of the Shadaime Hokage sealed the Kyuubi inside her body and began to drain it of its chakra. What you don't know is that Mito had a seal placed on her body that would take the chakra she drained from Kyuubi and purified and used it to power the barrier. You also know that Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, wife of the Yondaime Hokage, came to Konoha as a young girl to take up that mission and became the second person to hold the Kyuubi and drained it of its chakra while continuing to power the barrier that holds all those demons at bay. Lily waited a moment and said, I'm sure you and several people in Konoha have started to figure it out. Hiruzen said, Naruto Uzumaki. He's the one now powering the barrier, isn't he? Lily said, he was. You see, Minato Namikaze is believed to be an orphan. The truth is he is actually the son of Tsunade Senju, who became pregnant with him after a night of drinking with her teammate Jiraiya after her brother Naoki Senju was killed. Tsunade asked her grandmother Mito to hide her newborn son because it appeared that Iwa was trying to end the Senju clan. Now the reason this is important is when you know what really happened the night the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. Hiruzen asked, how could you know what really happened that night? The only known witness were myself and one Anbu who I have sworn to secrecy. Lily said. Simple Hiruzen. As she reached up and took off her mask and Hiruzen's eyes widened and said in a shocked voice, Kushina, that's not possible. I saw you die. Kushina said. You saw both Minato and I get stabbed by the Kyuubi claw protecting our son, and then you saw Minato summon the Shinigami to seal the Kyuubi, but you were too far away to hear what we were saying to each other and to our son. Minato took a chance to also seal myself in the seal with the Kyuubi, but when he sealed the Kyuubi he only sealed half of the Kyuubi chakra. Remember who Naruto grandmother is and what ability her grandfather had. Naruto has the same ability. Hiruzen's eyes widened and said, he can use the Mokuden bloodline. Kushina said. Yes. Naruto body suppressed Kyuubi chakra that was already cut in half from where it was at after being drained by both Mito and myself all those years. Kyuubi dead. Naruto completely drained it off all its chakra, but remember. Naruto also has the seal that is powering the barrier holding all those demons in the Forest of Death. With Kyuubi dead, that seal is going to get weaker until it fails, and then all those demons are going to be able to escape. Hiruzen paled and Kushina said, but luckily we can start draining those demons of their chakra, killing them in order to still keep them contained. Hiruzen let out a breath and Kushina said, unfortunately because of you making that announcement, the treatment the people of Konoha had toward Naruto, as well as the 40 assassination attempts on his life by the people of Konoha, Naruto has no loyalty to Konoha and doesn't care if it was destroyed by the demons, since he sees the people of Konoha as demons thanks to you and the people of Konoha. Hiruzen's eyes widened and Kushina looked down and said, it's sad. To think someone who was the great-grandson of the Shidaime Hokage, great-great-grandnephew of the Nadaime Hokage and son of the Yondaime Hokage hates the village his family fought, sacrificed, and died for because of the way the people of Konoha treats the people who protects them. I guess I can understand how Tsukumo Hatake must have felt after he thought the lives of his comrades was more important than a mission. The people of Konoha and his own teammates turned their back on him because he saved their lives and failed the mission. Naruto wasn't even given a choice and was forced to save your lives, and the people screamed out in the streets demanding he be put to death for it. Wiping a tear from her face, Kushina said, I'm not really here right now, Hiruzen. I'm still sealed away because if I leave the seal I'll die. This is a special clone that Naruto and I were able to create to allow me limited access outside. Naruto right now is with the Fire Lord, who has his medics trying to help his body recover from the abuse he suffered at the hands of Konoha, as well as deal with the changes his body went through after successfully killing the Kyuubi. It looks like he gained a new bloodline from it, so that makes at least 3 bloodlines he has, since he has the Uzumaki and Mokuden bloodline. Looking up at Hiruzen, she said, the Kyuubi didn't escape and I didn't release it. The night Naruto was born, an enemy ninja attacked us, first killing your wife, using a clone to kidnap Naruto and also kidnapping me. Minato was able to force the enemy ninja to flee, rescuing both of us, but not before he had destroyed the seal holding the Kyuubi. Hiruzen. Minato took every precaution possible. He created over 20 different decoy sites as to where I could be delivering at. None of the decoys were hit, which means he knew we were going to be at that specific location. Only 6 people knew where we were going to be at. Minato, me, your wife, you, and the 2 you forced us to tell, even though we told you we didn't trust them because they would tell him even when ordered not to. If Minato and I were to be killed by the enemy ninja, you would have been the only person in Konoha who could have sealed the Kyuubi away at the cost of your life. He had the most to gain. Hiruzen pursed his lips together and said, Do you have any proof? Kushina said. Just one. The enemy ninja who attacked us had the damaged Sharingan eye of Obito Uchiha who was killed. He was the man in charge of recovering Obito body and destroying it. Hiruzen asked. How can you be sure that it was Obito eye? Kushina said. Because Minato had me put some of my chakra in each member of his genin team so that way if they came to our home looking for him I would be able to tell it was them. I only did that with one Uchiha and that was Obito, and Kakashi Sharingan that he got from Obito is on the other side of his face. Then the eye I saw. The eye the enemy ninja had that night had some of my chakra in it. The only way that is possible is if he gave it to the enemy ninja since he told you and Minato that his team had destroyed it. Hiruzen pursed his lips together and said, very well. I'll look into it. But what about the current problem with the demons? Kushina said. The barrier will hold for at least another 6 years so we have time. But the problem is that in order for Naruto to begin charging the barrier again he not only has to return to Konoha but also seal a demon inside of him again to begin draining it of its chakra. After the way the people of Konoha attacked and abused him before when he didn't even have a choice he believes they will be even more evil than they were before. He's only an 8-year-old child and the safety of not only Konoha but the Fire Nation is being placed on his shoulders. That's not even thinking about the fact he's most likely the last Uzumaki so it's going to be up to him to ensure the Uzumaki bloodline continues in order for his children to take over the duty of containing and killing the demons. Kushina took a deep breath and said, the abuse he suffered mentally is the hardest to deal with Hiruzen. After all the years the people called him a demon and treated him like they did and now the changes his body has suffered from destroying the Kyuubi he actually thinks they are right, that he is a demon. How can I ask my son to take up such a heavy burden after how much he has suffered already at the hands of the people I once called friends? That my husband and I sacrificed so much for, that my entire family was destroyed in order to protect. I already have to deal with the knowledge that I cursed my son in the first place since I knew I was dying from my wounds. How can I as his mother do that to him and ask so much more of him? Tell me Hiruzen. How? As tears fell down her face. Hiruzen lowered his hat and said, it's my fault. Only 2 people knew the truth. Konoha was so weak after the Kyuubi attack that I was afraid that our enemies would attack so I publicly told everyone about the Kyuubi being sealed not only to help give the people of Konoha something to believe in but also to scare other villages into leaving us alone unless we use Kyuubi against them. I took your son's humanity from him by turning him into a weapon for the village and I gave the people of Konoha too much credit believing they would see him as the hero he was. Perhaps it was my own anger over the death of my wife. But your son shouldn't suffer anymore for my actions and for the people of Konoha. I've got a new grandson named Konohamaru. I'll make. Slap. Kushina glared at Hiruzen as she pulled her hand away from his face and said, you bastard. You would make another child, your own flesh and blood suffer, after what you heard the people of this village did to mine. Even if it was possible for someone not of the Uzumaki blood to do it I wouldn't help you and I am the only person who has the knowledge of even how to do it. Nobody else can do it without taking the chance of releasing the demons. The will of fire is dead Hiruzen. Hiruzen's eyes widened and Kushina turned and began to walk away and said, I shouldn't have come here. Whatever happens will be decided between Naruto, me, and the Fire Lord. As far as I care, Konoha can burn and I'd piss on its ashes with a smile on my face. I don't know if I'll ever see you again Hiruzen. You better hope if we don't. As she disappeared in a yellow flash. Hiruzen sat there for several moments before he screamed, Anbu.